Any of us can absorb, but it really gives us more basis for thinking about the prey and predator interactions, including the impacts on people or the impacts from people and how we work with those. So thank you for that. It was a great presentation. I'd also like to welcome our two new commissioners, and when we do introductions now, we'll give them a couple extra minutes to tell you a little bit about themselves. So we'll start with those. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Good morning, Becky Hatfield Hyde. I'm from the drier side of Oregon. Been out there this morning looking at that foggy stuff and also the Klamath Basin. So happy to be here and happy to have our new commissioners on board.
Good morning, Mark Labhart. I am representative of Central Oregon, but of course, we all represent all of Oregon. So welcome to the new commissioners. We've give them congratulations and condolences at the same time.
Yeah, good morning, Bob Spellbrink, Slats, Oregon. Yeah, ditto on that.
Go ahead, Hugh.
Great. My name is Hugh Morrison. Mentioned just joining the commission. Really glad to be here with you all today. Really glad to be jumping into the work of the commission and feel really honored to be able to serve the department, to serve the mission of ODW, and to serve as Mark mentioned, all Oregonians. I'll just say briefly, I've had a fairly extensive career in fish and wildlife management. Spent most of my career working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but glad to be continuing on that work for fish and wildlife. And again, all of us as human beings who are happy to make use of the resources that are out there, and glad to be here with you today and look forward to the agenda.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you to my fellow commissioners. Dave Moldall. I live in Portland, Oregon with my family, and I've got two energetic fishing-loving young boys. I'm absolutely thrilled. This is my first day on the commission. A little bit about my background. I've worked in conservation, environmental planning, and management in Southwest Florida, Texas. Went to grad school for water resources management at Indiana University. I've worked also in federal law enforcement background, and for the last decade plus been working in renewable energy development, working for Energy Trust of Oregon, supporting customers, municipal and private customers to develop common sense energy efficiency and renewable energy generation projects. I'm a lifelong hunter fisher, licensed in Oregon, fished and hunted all throughout the country, and just absolutely thrilled to be working here on the commission and with my fellow commissioners.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Commissioner Dallas DeFries.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well there. I'm Dallas Hall DeFries. I am the commissioner in the East region. I'm out here in Baker County right now, and it's nice and crisp and foggy, which is really pretty. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Welcome. And Director Colbert, would you like to introduce yourself, if you will?
Good morning, everyone. There we go. Good morning, everyone. I am Debbie Colbert, Director of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and very excited to have a full 7-member commission officially today. It's been a while. Welcome to our new members.
Thank you. And we usually have Michelle Tate introduce herself now, but since she's trying to put our system together, we'll let her off the hook on that. For today's meeting, we hope to finish sometime around 3. I shouldn't even say that because that means that it'll probably go till 5 or 6, but we're going to try for 3. We do have a executive session scheduled if we need it. We don't think we need one right now, but we have it if we need it. And so I'll just turn to the director for the director's report.
All right. Well, we have a few items for the director's report this morning, and we're actually going to change the order a little bit because we have our Deputy Director, Sean Clements, joining us from another meeting. And just because of schedules on his end, we're going to start with the Commission's 2026 proposed work plan. And I'm hoping that we have Sean online with us. And yes, we do. And I think, Michelle, that Sean said he could share the slides from his computer if you need him to. Okay, so Sean, you've got the slides?
Everyone, I have them, but the share thing is blanked out. So I can't.
He doesn't have ability to share from his.
To make me the presenter.
Hey, Sean, you're going in and out a bit.
Yeah, this is the danger of doing things from a hotel with weak Wi-Fi.
Okay, now you sound good.
Can you? Hi. Well, John, so the new commissioner, Chair Wall, Chair Hatfield Hyde, commissioners for the Rare Limits, the deputy here, Fish and Wildlife.
That's the
Excited to be
2025
here
work
talking
plan.
about 2026. Can you hear me all?
Yeah, we're just having some problems on our end. We don't have the right file pulled up, Sean. We're just going to get all of the tech stuff out of the way at the beginning of the day, and then everything's going to go really well the rest of the day. Yeah, that's, I think someone's moved the wrong version in there, Michelle. No, it's different. Okay, so Sean, why don't you, we have
I
it,
could
yeah.
come
We
back.
just, what's that, Sean?
You can go to Ken and I can come back.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and switch and go to the financial report while we work on, Sean, you may need to switch to maybe your cell phone as a hotspot or something, just because you're going in and out. So let's deal with some of the technology stuff off to the side, get the right file, and we'll do the financial report. And we have Ken Loffink, our Chief Operating Officer, who's going to give the regular financial report. And we also asked Davi Palmieri to also join because we wanted to spend just a few extra minutes today talking about federal budgets and just some of the uncertainty and scenarios that we are considering. So go ahead, Ken.
Thank you, Director. Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, Commissioners, Director Colbert. For the record, Ken Loffink, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I had in my notes here, happy to kick things off this morning. Then we jumped to Sean. I scratched it back off. No, we're back on. Happy to kick things off this morning with the financial report. It has been a couple months since we've chatted. I think it was September when I gave the last financial report. So lots happened since then. I'll go over a few of those items here this morning. But the story really remains the same. The department's finances remain on solid footing, and all revenues and expenditures for the current biennium are tracking as expected. For the month ending October 31st, 2025, ODFW's unrestricted cash balance ended at $72.87 million, and restricted cash ended at $90.91 million for a total of $163.78 million in custody at State Treasury. As has been the case for the last couple of years, the unrestricted cash balance includes approximately $19 million in insurance proceeds received for damages incurred during the 2020 wildfires. While these insurance proceeds are captured within our unrestricted cash balance, these are earmarked for replacing assets and infrastructure lost in the 2020 wildfires, which means our true unrestricted cash balance is approximately $53 million. Now, real quick, for the benefit of our new commissioners and review for everyone else, I'll spend just a few minutes going over some details about unrestricted and restricted cash. I think a good review for everyone and for the public. So let's start with unrestricted cash. So this is really our main fish and wildlife sub-account that we use to cover the majority of our monthly operating costs. ODFW monthly operating expenses generally range from $19 to $20 million per month, and 16 or 17 million of that comes from our unrestricted cash account. And the remaining 3 or 4 million coming from general fund and then restricted cash accounts like lottery fund and other dedicated accounts, which I'll get into in a second. Past audits from the Oregon Secretary of State recommend that we carry 3 to 4 months of operating capital within our unrestricted cash account. That's not only just for peace of mind, rainy day fund to ensure we have sufficient capital to maintain our operations, but also a key part of our operations is the fact that 40% of our budget is federal fund. And how that works is ODFW does the work. Even if it's federally funded, we pay for it up front the cash, and get reimbursed down the line. Generally, it's a pretty smooth process. It can take a couple months, but if there's delays in receiving federal reimbursement, we are really dependent on that cash balance to ensure we can pay our monthly bills and keep the lights on. There's also some seasonality to our license sales and revenues feeding into our unrestricted cash account. So we can really see that cash balance, ending balance, go up or down 10, 11, $12 million in a month. So just all in all, maintaining that sufficient cash balance is just really critical to our operations. I mentioned Secretary of State recommended 3 to 4 months. So at 16 or 17 million dollars, that puts our target range, anywhere from 48 to 68 million dollars. And right now, as I said, 53 million dollars, we fall right into that range, and we expect to stay there moving forward. This is something we monitor very closely, obviously keep you up to date on at each commission meeting, and so we'll just continue to do that and keep you apprised as we move forward. Now moving on to restricted cash. I don't think we've ever actually had this conversation about like what comprises in detail our restricted cash accounts. So restricted cash, when I say restricted cash, these are really our statutorily dedicated funds. They're statutorily dedicated for specific purposes. We have 43 different statutorily dedicated cash accounts that we monitor and manage within our bank account. These are things like lottery funds, capital construction funds, grant programs like PFA, OCRF, A&H, R&E, and others. And then specific funds like the Commercial Fish Fund, Halibut Fund, Screening and Passage, things of that nature that are used for specific purposes. And the key with restricted, right? It's restricted. I can't use those to just to pay for general operating costs. I can't use them to pay for the lights. They serve a critically important purpose, but they're really independent of like our fee structure and our monthly operations, right? There is a little, $3 or $4 million per month that we pull out of those, pay for things like a little bit of salary and whatnot, but they really are for special purposes. And a couple of highlights I'll share is one, about 40 million of that 90 million is ODFW grants. So those are our grants that we use for PFA, OCRF, A&H, things like that. So again, these are critical for on-the-ground improvements for fish, wildlife habitat, Oregonians, but not something that we can use to pay for monthly operations.
Can you just for the public, can you PFA, OCR?
Yep, Private Forest Accord Grant Program, Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, Access and Habitat, and Recreation Enhancement being are 4 of our bigger grant programs, and thank you. I actually had it written out in long form, and I'm not looking at my notes, so. So yeah, 40 million is our grant programs. We have another 21 million that is for capital construction. That's both internal ODFW infrastructure from past approved bond funding, but also we have $14.5 million in our account for fish and wildlife passage infrastructure. Those are from lottery bonds. So right there, 2 categories, $60 million of that 90 million restricted cash. The remainder 30 million is a variety, like 35 or so sub-accounts for things like screening surcharge, fish passage surcharge, halibut, commercial fish fund, and on down the list. There is some salary that's paid out of this, and each one of those accounts is managed specifically with the program leads to ensure we have sufficient balance and capital within the individual account. So I thought just a good opportunity to take a couple minutes to go over, some details of what it means when I say unrestricted versus restricted, what's important, what's not, and kind of the composition of those accounts, because I think it's important to frame up for the context of our finances. With that, I will move on to just other business in 25-27, in the 25-27 budget. As you might be aware of in the news, there is a projected state general fund and lottery fund shortfall. In response to this state lottery and general fund shortfall, the Legislative Fiscal Office requested that all state agencies provide a 5% reduction list by fund type for general fund, lottery fund, and all other fund. So totaling 5% of agency allocations across those fund types for potential use this biennium to help get at minimizing or lowering the projected shortfall for those funds. ODFW responded to this request utilizing a multi-pronged strategy to identify and prioritize potential reductions, things like vacancy savings, projected vacancy savings from positions that haven't been filled yet, associated with new positions we received in the last legislative session, targeted S&S reductions, and then some positions that were on our 25-27 10% budget reduction list that we developed for the 25-27 budget. I mentioned that we're required to provide other fund reductions, but I just do want to call out here that while they're required as a part of this exercise, we think the risks to the other fund programs are minimal and we're not expecting any impacts to those funds. But for next steps here, or I guess I should say that ODFW joined other natural resource agencies down at the Capitol during legislative days in November and presented our response to the LFO request to the Joint Ways and Means Subcommittee on Natural Resources. And for next steps, the reduction options will be considered by the legislature for potential use this biennium, and any decisions made on reductions by the legislature will occur during the 2026 legislative session upcoming in February. Moving on now to 27-29 budget development. It's hard to believe, but we're here. Budget development for 27-29, the next biennium is kicking off pretty much in earnest here this month. It's really going to ramp up in January, February, March as we get into next year. We're going to keep the commission apprised of activities along the way and loop you in on with a monthly update. And then I'll just put it on your calendar, June 26th, 2026, we're going to be right here presenting our agency request budget. So just 7 short months away, a lot of work to do in between there. Next steps for us over the next month, we're going to be working on preliminary policy option packages and just looking at some expenditures and revenues as we start working towards that budget development. And then last, though, it's not on my written report, do want to speak briefly about federal funding. It's been a long and challenging year with federal funds, as we're all aware. Lots of unknowns and uncertainty really over the last 12 months that we've navigated. With that said, as I've reported here several times over the last year, like as of yet, ODFW has yet to see direct financial impacts from federal funding or has yet to see direct impacts to our federal funding. We've also had timely reimbursement on a regular basis, even through the federal shutdown. So more or less, despite the uncertainty, it has been status quo for us on the federal funding front. But I say that, and there's still much uncertainty remaining, and that's why we have our federal policy director, Davia Palmieri, up here today to talk a little bit about federal funding moving forward. So take it away.
Thanks, Ken. Chair Wall, Director Colbert, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Davia Palmieri, and I'm joining you today as ODFW's Federal Policy Director. The uncertainty about our federal funding picture is certainly frustrating. So I'm just here to give you a little bit of information about why we have so much uncertainty and to reassure you that we are watching this very closely and we're prepared to adapt if and when that becomes necessary. So I'm going to start sort of going all the way back to the basics. The Constitution says that, quote, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. And Congress typically passes laws authorizing discretionary spending by the federal agencies in 12 separate packages. ODFW receives federal funds across a huge diversity of federal budget line items. But for this purpose, we're focused on programs that provide direct financial support to ODFW or funding for operations of federal hatcheries with really large impacts in Oregon. So a few of our highest priorities are on this slide, and I apologize, but any federal funding conversation is an acronym soup, and I'll just run through them for you. So in that first line, NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that contains NOAA Fisheries, that gives funding to ODF&W through the Mitchell Act for hatchery operations and habitat work in the Columbia. PCSRF, or some people say PACSRF, is the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund, which is a really big program for Oregon that goes through OWEB for fish passage and fish conservation recovery. There's a lot of marine line items in the NOAA budget as well. In the Interior and Environment Bill, FWS is Fish and Wildlife Service, USFS is U.S. Forest Service, and BLM is the Bureau of Land Management. Looking at energy and water, USACE, that's the Army Corps of Engineers, which operates a lot of the hydropower system in Oregon, and the Bureau of Reclamation, which similarly relates to hydropower. And then the agriculture package includes a lot of programs that are relevant for conservation, but the biggest one that we look at is the NRCS, which is the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So across all these packages, this is 4 of the 12 federal budget packages that we follow. We only have certainty. The Department of Agriculture has a full year appropriation, and so we know what that funding picture looks like for NRCS. But the federal year started October 1st, and we're almost a full quarter into it, and we don't know what the full funding will look like. And just a quick note for folks who follow our budget, the wildlife and sport fish restoration programs, which is the source of a lot of ODF&W's federal funds, are not part of this situation because those are permanently dedicated funds. So they are required to be obligated to the states every year. So we lack certainty on a lot of the programs that are up here. Just to kind of explain a little bit this concept of a package, there's 12 appropriations bills that Congress passes. And so just as, for example, here, Commerce, Justice, Science, that covers the Department of Commerce, which includes NOAA, which includes NOAA Fisheries and the programs that I have listed here, but it also includes the Department of Justice. And there's some political holdups related to the headquarters of the FBI that could hold up NOAA funding. And so there's these strong connections between seemingly unrelated things. And then the actual appropriation statutes, the law that Congress creates, includes top line numbers. So within the Interior and Environment Bill, for example, it might include $1.3 billion for Fish and Wildlife Service. And Commissioner Morrison could talk way more about that. But the detailed line items for programs like $72 million specifically for state and tribal wildlife grants might not actually be in the actual statute. That appears in the committee report. And when you have a continuing resolution, there's no committee report with it, that just the top line number carries through. So that becomes really important in the current situation because some argue that the Fish and Wildlife Service could spend however the administration likes, as long as they don't exceed $1.3 billion, because we'd lack that certainty that the State and Tribal Wildlife Grants Program would be funded under a continuing resolution. So I'm going to quickly review the federal budget process, and you don't have to memorize this or really get into the details, but you can see that at any given time, there may be as many as 3 federal budgets being worked at the same time. And so right now in December of 2025, there's work happening on fiscal year 2026, which we're already in, and fiscal year 2027, which would start October 1st next year. So the general expectation is that the president delivers his proposed budget to Congress in February. See if I have a pointer. So this point here, there should be a president's budget. And that's kind of analogous to the governor's recommended budget being delivered in advance of the legislative session here in Oregon. That gives Congress 7 months to negotiate in their committees and move forward legislation to fund the federal government by October 1st. Also note that members typically start working on their congressionally directed spending, which I referenced down here. I'm hitting Ken with the laser. That's CDS, Congressionally Directed Spending. They asked for those starting in January. And we're really grateful to routinely work with Senators Merkley and Wyden on the state's priorities for those opportunities. Despite not having a fiscal year 2026 budget yet, we are likely to see requests for our fiscal year 2027 priorities very soon. So that's how it's supposed to work. And this is what's happened so far. So starting with the end of fiscal year 2025, right over here, Congress did not successfully do the 12 appropriations bills at all for fiscal year 2025. So there is a continuing resolution, October 1st, 2024, through the end of March. And then they ended up doing a full year continuing resolution for the rest of fiscal year 2025 with the reconciliation package in the middle. So with that initial continuing resolution for fiscal year 2025, it doesn't include that specific guidance that I mentioned before. It just has those top level numbers. But many of the federal agencies did notices of partial funding opportunities for that first half of the year, assuming that they would end up with a level that would cover that. And then from March to October of 2025, there were moments where it seemed possible the administration would not actually provide the second half of those opportunities, despite the funding limitation being there for them. They didn't have that specific direction. But generally, they did follow through on those commitments for fiscal year 2025. And as Ken said, we didn't see those impacts. So for fiscal year 2026, the president's budget was significantly delayed. It was released in May and June, which is pretty typical in the first year of a new administration. But then Congress spent May and June focused on the reconciliation package, which I won't say much about, but generally the impact to ODF&W of that package was loss of future opportunity because a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act programs were ended early. And so we just weren't able to apply for those funds, but we did not lose funds that we already had. And then in August and September this year, there was some regular action in Congress. For all the bills that we track, both chambers have moved a version of their package out of the committees in those chambers. And then, as you all know, there was a shutdown in October and November, which ended with a final full year appropriations package for 3 bills, one being Department of Agriculture that we talked about, and then Veterans Affairs and funding for the legislature itself. And then they had passed a continuing resolution for the other 9 packages. So that covers NOAA and Fish and Wildlife Service and Army Corps through the end of January. So that takes us through here. So once again, our federal partners are operating without certainty about what their final funding will look like. And we are seeing them hold off on notices of funding opportunity for fiscal year 2026. So we might not know what the impact to us is until after the end of January. So we are all working with some level of risk that Congress won't appropriate enough to cover what we're already working on. That includes the state and federal agencies. And so that's where my question marks come in. That's the uncertainty that they're all feeling and dealing with. So there are multiple possible outcomes, which are pretty divergent, which is part of that feeling that we have. We don't know what's going to happen. Generally, we're either likely to have a full year funding package that Congress pushes through that covers the agencies we rely on, or we'll see another full year continuing resolution at fiscal year 2024 levels. So if the appropriations described by the Senate packages are finalized, it's a flat funding scenario for ODF&W, plus some really awesome congressionally directed funding from Senators Merkley and Wyden for Coal River's hatchery infrastructure and a fish passage project that you all saw when you're out in Pendleton. If the appropriations levels described in the House packages are finalized, we will see reductions in many of the programs we follow, except that it keeps state and tribal wildlife grants and the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund whole, which is really great for us. The House package does cut NOAA fisheries significantly, which would be pretty impactful for our Columbia and marine programs. And then finally, if there's another continuing resolution at 2024 levels, those top line appropriations for each agency would really be great for our interests because fiscal year 2024 was a pretty good budget year for natural resources. But we do expect that the administration would seek to find ways to not actually spend that and implement those ongoing program levels because they won't have that line item direction that Congress has. For this scenario, we're relying on what the president's budget said about what we should expect. And that generally aligns with the reductions in the House packages, but it also zeroes out state and tribal wildlife grants and the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund. So I think that would be among our worst case scenarios that we see. So I'll just end my remarks on a kind of hopeful note that I feel, which is that the members of Congress have really strong incentives to successfully move full year spending packages because of those congressionally directed spending opportunities. They didn't get any of those in fiscal year 2025. And so they have got a really strong incentive to bring that money back home. And so the packages that we see from Senators Merkley and Wyden for Coal Rivers and in Pendleton, those were in the fiscal year 2025 draft Senate bill and that didn't make it. And I think that a lot of members have a similar feeling of like, we've been trying to get this done. And so there's my moment of hope that I think we could get the full year appropriations. And as I said at the beginning, we will continue to track the federal funding picture and we'll alert the commission if there becomes a need to adapt. And thanks for having me this morning. Thanks, Ken.
Yep. And thank you. And that's all we have. Happy to answer any questions.
So, you know, just especially for our new members, like this is a little bit deeper dive on the federal side than what we would typically have in our financial report. But we wanted to give you a sense of just how, as Ken said, we haven't seen any negative impacts so far, but it has been almost a daily up and down in terms of the information that we are receiving. And frankly, our federal funders aren't in any better position to help us know what's going to happen. So we are remaining extremely vigilant. And we're really grateful to have Davia focused on this. And we've got some great relationships with our federal administration level folks and with our senators and, you know, also with a number of our stakeholder groups that are also very much engaged on this and helping to weigh in with their members. And we, you know, Davia and Ken can take any questions if you have any.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
So I am very pleased to hear that the funding is continuing to flow. That's actually a little bit surprising, but glad to hear that, even if there are these daily questions going on. I appreciate, Davia, the kind of overview of the federal funding picture. I'm curious, it's a little bit outside the fiscal realm, but it could affect how the money does flow. Are we anticipating or hearing about any potential structural changes with the organizations that we work with primarily at the federal level that, again, if they are going through some sort of restructuring, might slow the flow of funds?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Morrison, yes. I can highlight two for you. The U.S. Department of Agriculture released a memo this summer from the Secretary of Agriculture laying out a restructure plan. And then they opened a comment period on that, and we did provide comment. And the very top line details of that were consolidating a lot of the research groups under Department of Agriculture, including the U.S. Forest Service. So our Pacific Northwest Research Station, those folks would have moved to Colorado. And restructuring the U.S. Forest Service to eliminate the region structure. And so most of the operations would be either at the national forest level or at headquarters level. And then a similar changes to NRCS and the other USDA Interior and Commerce side of things. The budget proposal from Department of Commerce in the president's budget included comments about moving the National Marine Fisheries Service authorities for the Endangered Species Act and Marine Mammal Protection Act to the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Department of the Interior. The Department of the Interior budget did not contemplate receiving those authorities, and Congress's reaction was generally interested in the idea, but felt like they needed more information. So if Congress moves forward with regular appropriations this year, they're not going to authorize that restructuring, but we are certainly paying attention to that because we do believe that could be impactful and depending on how it's done.
And Chair Wall and Commissioner Morrison, I'll just add, you know, beyond just restructuring, one impact we have definitely seen, and it's probably no surprise, is just impacts of less capacity at the federal level. We have lots of folks in the room behind us that can speak to that better than I can, but just particularly in Columbia River Marine, like just having less capacity at the federal level has changed, you know, kind of on the fly how we do our work in a lot of cases. And so we do have impacts of that. And yeah, that could, you know, structural changes will just, you know, kind of further some of the complications there.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you both very much. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move back to the 2026 proposed work plans, and we're going to pull up the slides. Talking slow, so And given the issues that are happening on, the internet on Sean's side, we're actually I'm just gonna run it through and then Sean can jump in and correct anything I get wrong. So,
Looks like he's got the presentation up.
okay.
I'm ready to jump in if connection goes bad.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so just for background, especially with our new commissioners, we have moved over the last several years to a process where we work closely with the commission, the chair and vice chair of the commission, to kind of lay out a roadmap for the upcoming year's work. And I'm going to take you through a little bit about how we build the annual agenda. And again, this is not intended to be set in stone, but to really just forecast what kinds of things you have to get done, what kinds of things you'd like to talk about. And it recognizes that things happen and we have to pivot or add or delay. And, but again, it just gives us kind of a working sense of what's coming. So in order to build the annual agenda, we do a couple of things to inform that. Each summer, we do a survey of our commissioners and we ask questions about, part of what you do is travel around the state for a portion of your meetings. So we ask you, like, where would you like to be? What issues on the ground or statewide are you interested in? What kind of workshops would you like to see? Are there any ways that we can better support you, both logistically and also in terms of the information that we're providing to support your decision-making? So that's a really important piece of information that goes into building out the work plan. Then you just have statutorily required work. So by statute, you are responsible for setting things like harvest. And so we have to build out a work plan for you that has those action items coming in front of you. And then based on when you're going to make your decisions, we work backwards in terms of our public processes to gather input, to publicly notice draft proposals for things like rulemaking. And so that's another big piece of what informs your work plan. And then the third is that we really tried to lean into recently under Chair Wall and Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde's leadership is, can we have some overarching ways of looking at the work of the commission so that it feels less like a shotgun and more like, there are connections being made across kind of thematic focal areas. Next slide, Sean. We'll start with the meeting locations. Keep moving. Oh, yep. All right.
Here we go.
So again, this is getting into some of the logistics, but it's really important, not only for commissioners, when you get out on site across the state, it is such an amazing opportunity for you to see things. We always include a tour. We're going to really lean in and try to do some more activities outside of touring. Commissioner Labhart has a lot of experience with OWEB and some of the stakeholder engagements they do in evening. We're going to be looking at those kinds of opportunities in this coming year, especially. But and then you get a chance to interact with people across the state that care about what we care, are impacted by the work that you do. So, we kind of are outlaying here for you kind of what we're looking at for 2026. And we try to really meet whatever places you all have an interest in, but we will just acknowledge that sometimes there are some logistical considerations or weather. You'll recall last year we had our September meeting and it was during Pendleton Roundup. And we were like, okay, can't go to Pendleton. We want to go to Pendleton, but just by virtue of that conflict. So that's kind of the balancing act that we do when we bring back. And so you'll see that in the blue side, we're going to be given just some weather logistics that we've seen over the last couple of years. We're going to go virtual in January. We've got a pretty light agenda, so we felt like that not only because of weather, but also just because there wasn't as much happening for the commission. We're shooting for Eugene in, wow, these dots don't have dates. Then we're gonna go to Medford. We're still working on April, just in terms of the venue, Redmond or Lincoln City. We're gonna have a hold. We kind of hold your calendars in case something comes up that you need to deal with, and we ask you to kind of try to protect those dates as best you can. As soon as we know whether you're gonna need them, we try to let you know so you can release those dates from your calendar. Then we're always back in Salem in August for, that's the day that we do our annual staff and employee recognition awards that the commission helps to present. And it's a really fun barbecue and celebration. And then we've got La Grande, later in the fall, and then some virtual and holds, later in the year, again, back in Salem in December. Gonna keep moving. And that just as a quick reminder in terms of, just what is the work of the commission? It's really, everything you do stems from statute. And so you have a whole body of work that is around setting policy and adopting administrative rules. So when you look at your work plan, it is, things like approving new or updated species conservation and management plans, amending or establishing rules to implement statutory authority, establishing the time, place, manner, and methods for harvest, and implementing the State Endangered Species Act. You also have a number of just approvals that you do, and you're going to see some of those today. So you have a number of advisory groups that are all based on volunteer service, and those members, you do a lot of the appointments of those different advisory groups. You also are responsible for approving funding for a number of our programs, the Private Forest Accord, our Access and Habitat, Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. And again, you'll see some of that today. Any kind of property acquisition or disposal that meets a certain threshold also has to be approved by you by statute. And then you also review our biennial budget. And that's why Ken mentioned that for this year, you'll see the 27-29 budget is going to come to you in June. So again, I'm just trying to give you a feel for like, why is this the stuff that we see? Next item, Don. I'm going to hand it next to Chair Wall and Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde and just talk about some of the focus areas for the commission.
Thank you, Director. At the end of the day, when I look at, and this is a little bit for the new commissioners as well as just to remind all of us, at the end of the day, the reason to spend the time that we have to figure out what our focal areas ought to be and to figure out how all of these pieces interrelate is because we need to be always making better decisions. That's our objective at the end of the day, is to make better decisions across a very wide scope of work that this department handles. And what we have done, we have spent a lot of time in the last couple years building the work plan, built it out. So this is the spine, if you will, of our work plan. We all come at this from a variety of perspectives and backgrounds. We put a lot of value on hearing from people. And we all, as Commissioner Labhart and others have mentioned, represent the entire state. We're from different parts of the state, different backgrounds, but we represent the entire state. I'd like to talk for just a minute about the three focal areas that we have landed on, and there was a great deal of thought behind these, and I'll talk about that just briefly. The first one, climate resiliency and fish and wildlife adaptation. This is a critical overarching one. We will hear more about it today in one of our items. That's a presentation. And we have this one on the agenda every time. That's because it is a critical overarching item for us and relates to everything we do. The next one I'll spend a little bit more time on, landscape scale conservation. This is because the issues that come to us that you all work with every day are complex. We heard a lot about this yesterday. They demand integrated, comprehensive solutions Rarely is there a silver bullet option or a silver bullet solution that pops up. Rarely is it only one topic. It's almost always issues that are integrated, multiple factors working in varieties of ways with each other, and they're not isolated. There have been 3 successes that I would just like to mention real quickly, and these are not successes that the commission is claiming. These are successes we look at that the staff and partners across the state have worked on for years. One of them is success in the Columbia River, some of the tributary watersheds, and you'll hear about this in one of the informationals today. Working on key habitat work and passage, we've had some good luck in those specific tributaries. So that's a comprehensive landscape scale solution. Another one that Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde could talk about at great length is, of course, the Klamath. And you've seen a lot in the news about this. It takes years and a lot of money and a lot of deep, long-term engagement in the community to make these work. But that's one where we see some success from the landscape scale conservation approach. And one other that I would mention is across the state, the coho recovery that we've seen, there's been some success in it. There is even some hope of delisting. That's 20 years of concerted effort. Habitat investment, painful, but people thought they were necessary cuts in the harvest that was going on at the time. Hatchery shifts, multiple dam or passage projects. And the outcome was, again, a success at the landscape scale, and that's our objective. The third arena then is serving all Oregonians. It's our hope that anyone who comes in front of us including the staff, feel welcome, respected, heard, that we are open with our public information, that we look at contrary views as well as ones that we might happen to agree with, and importantly, that we include solutions that build on what communities, small and large across the state, need. Those get built into our thinking. We've made some headway. We do feel like if we make this interconnectedness work, we will have better decisions as a result of keeping all the pieces connected. And those focal areas are related. So to do landscape scale work, landscape scale conservation effectively, has to be seen as serving all Oregonians, not one group or another, not one zip code or another. And it's a connected effort to keep that context. One-offs typically distract us from the broader solutions that we're looking for. It succeeds when there's a clear view of how the complex pieces interact with each other, though that's a pretty elusive objective sometimes, to see how all of the factors are going to affect each other. This work plan helps us identify what we prioritize and work on in the year, because as you can imagine, there's more than anybody can do, so we have to narrow it down. With that, I will let the Vice Chair add.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Wall. I'll just add one thing as an example. Last year, one of the tours that we went on was in Ontario, where we were deep in sagebrush country. And I really feel like not just that tour, but other tours that we experienced last year really kind of focused in and hit home on some of these priorities. That one in particular basically took us to 3 different situations where we were looking at really healthy, intact sagebrush country, a place that had more challenges, and then one that was, just not in good shape. So I just, then we were like tying the climate resilience into it, serving all Oregonians. Our commissioner that just stepped off the commission was really good at helping us, Commissioner King, helping us stay focused on serving all Oregonians, rural, urban, coastal, all of it. And so we thank her for that, but that is also a huge part of this. So just, I mean, my desire with the staff, and I think they're taking this serious with these focal areas, is that we continue to do that. I think our tour focus has changed a lot from like, let's go look at what's really good that's happening, like one good, perfect restoration project somewhere, and gone a lot deeper into like, hey, this is what's happening at scale here. How can we help these communities? So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this approach. And so thank you.
And Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde. Next slide, Sean. It is going to, these focal areas will show up for you in terms of the tours and the case studies that we bring forward for discussion. We are going to be diving into coastal coho recovery as a great example of landscape scale conservation. I mean, it's a 20-year effort. So we're going to be talking about that next year. We're also going to be circling back on our mule deer implementation, elk management, and salmon recovery in the Willamette. So all case studies that are operating at a landscape scale, and really kind of built on the surveys and what the commission has asked for. We also have regular climate reports. You're going to have one of those today, and that's going to continue to kind of hit on those focal areas as we go through the year, and especially touch on aspects of the governor's recent executive order on climate resiliency. And then the connection back to the work, when you are getting reports from staff, it should be clear, you know, that kind of lens, that landscape lens, and that climate lens, and opportunities for adaptation as we are presenting things for your decision making. Any other questions on the 2026 work plan? All right, Sean, anything to add?
No, I think you covered it really well. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Sean. All righty. So lastly, I just want to mention that you do have your field reports in written form. And I feel like a little bit of a broken record. I hope everybody checks out the field reports. There's copies out on the tables. It's just such a great snapshot of some of the work that's happening in the agency. You'll see a broad range of topics covered in the field report for you this meeting. Everything from beaver emphasis area work to VR videos for our new Minam wildlife area. Some first, not so good kind of first detection of the fungus that caused white nose syndrome in bats. That's like a not good first. But then we also had a good first, which was our first sighting of Sierra Nevada red fox in 17 years in wilderness areas near Crater Lake. So just encourage everyone to check that out. A lot of interesting material in that. And I think that's it for the director's report. If Chair Wall, if you'd like to move to the temporary rules.
Do you want to do the climate change report
Oh, yeah.
first?
Oh, yeah. Golly, jumping around is never good. Oh, okay. So next we have our climate and ocean change policy report. And we have Phil Milburn, our Klamath Malheur watershed manager, and Mark Hereford, our Klamath Fisheries Reintroduction project leader, joining us today to talk about landscape scale salmon restoration in the Klamath Basin. And after that federal funding kind of discussion, you're going to feel a lot better after this one. So I guess let's just hand it off to Philip and Mark.
Okay, thank you. Chair Wall, members of the commission, Director Colbert, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. For the record, my name is Mark Hereford. I am the project leader for the Klamath Fisheries Reintroduction Project located in Klamath Falls. The title of this presentation is Reconnecting Rivers, Landscape Scale Salmon Restoration in the Klamath Basin. Connectivity is the backbone of climate smart conservation. For anadromous fish, this means they can access a diversity of habitats they need to complete their life cycle, as well as maintain diverse life histories among and within populations. The Klamath Dam removal is a massive restoration project focused on restoring connectivity to a diverse landscape. The map on the right shows the location of the Klamath River Basin, which is located on the border of Oregon and California. The first of 4 hydroelectric dams on the Klamath Mainstem River was constructed in 1912, resulting in the extirpation of salmon and other anadromous fishes upstream of the dam, which includes all of the Oregon portion of the basin. Subsequent dams further blocked migrating fishes from upstream habitat, which is depicted in the shaded region on this map. In an effort to restore salmon populations throughout the basin, these dams were completely removed in 2024, restoring natural stream processes downstream and opening up over 400 miles of stream habitat. It's been called the largest dam removal and river restoration project in U.S. history due to the number and size of dams and the amount of habitat that was opened up. The first dam removed was Copco 2 in the fall of 2023. J.C. Boyle Dam in Oregon and Copco 1 Dam were removed in the summer of 2024. And finally, the lowermost dam, Iron Gate Dam, in the fall of 2024. Prior to removal, California Department of Fish and Wildlife operated a salmon hatchery at Iron Gate Dam with an annual production goal of 6 million juvenile Chinook. The hatchery was relocated to a tributary upstream of Iron Gate Dam and now has a production goal of just over 3 million fall Chinook and 75,000 coho salmon. The removal of these dams allowed for the reconnection of a diverse assemblage of aquatic habitat. The map on the right shows the streams above the 4 removed dams in red that are now available to anadromous fishes. The habitat consists of numerous large groundwater source streams like Spring Creek, the major source to the Williamson River that remain cold throughout the summer, high gradient snowmelt systems in the headwaters of the Sprague River, and low gradient meandering streams like the Sprague River itself. All of these streams flow into the large hypereutrophic productive Upper Klamath Lake that seasonally becomes not suitable for salmonids, which is typically in July and August. Also, I want to point on this map, Keno Dam and Link River Dam, 2 dams that have are remaining in place that do serve a purpose. These dams do have fish passage, and they're located at the outlet of Upper Klamath Lake and further downstream. This figure shows the main daily temperatures of some of these tributaries. The point of this graph is to show the variation in temperature regimes of the habitat that is available and to highlight the cold summer temperatures of the large groundwater source streams like the Wood and the Williamson River, which are highlighted here in red and orange. Passage to all this habitat was restored on October 2nd of 2024, when the last chunks of Iron Gate Dam were removed, opening up habitat that had been blocked for over 100 years. Following the completion of the removal of Iron Gate Dam, monitoring for fall run Chinook salmon commenced in the newly available habitat. Within a week of full removal, the first Chinook salmon was observed above the former Iron Gate Dam in California. Subsequently, the first Klamath fall run Chinook was observed in Oregon on October 16th in a tributary to the Klamath River. Throughout the season, fall Chinook were observed spawning throughout much of this habitat above Iron Gate Dam and up to Keno Dam, with a total estimate of almost 2,000 individuals. While there were a couple observations of Chinook salmon in the fish ladder in Keno Dam, there were no observations of salmon upstream of Keno Dam in 2024. Similar to fall run Chinook salmon, coho salmon were observed in the newly available habitat between Iron Gate and Keno Dam. Coho salmon in the Klamath are part of the Southern Oregon, Northern California ESU and are federally listed as threatened. The total estimate for coho salmon above the former Iron Gate Dam was 117. In the spring of 2025, ODFW staff installed the downstream salmonid outmigrant trap in a tributary to the Klamath River located below Keno Dam in an effort to capture outmigrating juvenile Chinook. On June 26, we incidentally caught a Pacific lamprey in the trap and subsequently caught 4 more over a 2-week period. This was the first observation of Pacific lamprey in the Oregon portion of the Klamath Basin in over 100 years. It's important to note that removing the dams not only provided passage for fish, but it also restored the river to a more natural temperature regime. This figure shows the water temperature of the Klamath River below Iron Gate Dam in California pre-dam removal for the years 2001 to 2023 in light gray. Post-dam removal is in blue. A couple of things to note about this data is the warmer temperatures observed in the spring and significantly cooler temperatures in the fall after dams were removed. Also note the larger range of daily temperatures post-dam removal. This highlights the positive effect dam removal will have not only on connecting habitat above the dams, but also the positive effect it has on downstream of the dams and as fish migrate upstream. This could potentially result in fish arriving to spawning grounds earlier in the year, as well as reducing the need to seek out limited cold water refugia on their way upstream. In preparation for the 2025 fall Chinook spawning season, ODFW, in partnership with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, installed video systems at the Keno Dam fish ladder and Link River Dam fish ladder depicted on this map. The purpose of this was to document any fish presence migrating above these dams. While both dams do contain fish ladders, their ability to pass adult salmon was uncertain as they were both built after salmon were extirpated in this area. Additionally, ODFW installed a video canting system at the mouth of Spencer Creek, a tributary to the Klamath River below Keno Dam, to help assist with monitoring that tributary. The video systems at Keno and Link River dams allowed ODFW staff to document Chinook salmon utilizing the ladders to pass through both dams in the fall of 2025. However, in order to determine where those fish were going in the hundreds of miles of habitat above Upper Klamath Lake, ODFW staff captured Chinook salmon in tangle nets below Keno Dam and attached radio tags, which allowed them to be detected along their migratory pathway through a network of radio telemetry stations. This is a photo of one of those Chinook, the first one detected above Link River Dam. It was tagged on October 1st below Keno Dam, detected above Keno Dam on October 8th, detected above Link River Dam on October 9th, detected on Williamson River above the lake on October 10th, and on the Sprague River on October 14th. Working with staff from the Klamath tribes, these tagged fish led us to where numerous other Chinook were spawning throughout the tributaries of Upper Klamath Lake. In the 2021 Reintroduction Implementation Plan, we identified potential Chinook salmon spawning habitat in streams above Upper Klamath Lake. That habitat is identified in this figure in red. In the fall of this year, staff from the Klamath tribes and ODFW observed Chinook salmon spawning in almost every location that we had previously identified as potential habitat. The diversity of habitat fish were found in is also worth noting, from groundwater upwellings on the west side of the lake to large rivers like the Williamson River and way up in the headwaters of the Sprague River, over 80 miles from the Upper Klamath Lake and over 300 miles from the ocean. The areas where Chinook were found present a unique place to observe them, like the ones in these photos taken by a local photographer. Over 100 Chinook salmon were observed here, where groundwater upwelling along the margins of Upper Klamath Lake are crystal clear. And if you look closely at the lower photo, you can see a radio tag antenna on one of the fish that we actually tagged below Keno Dam from the bottom right photo. So 16 months after dam removal, the distribution of observed anadromous fishes in the newly available habitat is exceeding expectations, and the diversity of habitat these fish are utilizing will enhance their resiliency in a changing climate. What we are observing these first few years after dam removal are our salmon pioneering into new habitat. By monitoring them over time, we will be able to document where they are successfully repopulating. There's still a lot of work to do to ensure this is successful. While we observe some amazing things with Chinook passing over Keno and Link River dams, fish passage still needs to be improved at those locations. And while we observe Chinook spawning in historical habitat above Upper Klamath Lake, we also observe Chinook salmon in unscreened irrigation canals above Keno Dam.
Good morning, Chair Wall, members of the commission, Director Colbert. For the record, my name is Philip Milburn. I'm the Klamath and Malheur District Manager. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the work remaining to be done in the Klamath. So as Mark mentioned, the instinct for these fish to seek out new habitat did in some cases lead them into unsuitable areas. So today we wanted to focus on screening as one of several areas of ongoing work that's needed to realize the full benefit from Klamath reconnection. ODFW, in partnership with Trout Unlimited and water users, has been working to install fish screens for years. The ODFW cost share program and some grant programs had assisted landowners throughout the basin with fish screening. And as dam removal plans progressed, staff have worked to increase the pace of that screening. Next slide, Mark. One of the first steps was to reassess where we prioritize our efforts. Past prioritization efforts did not include anadromous fish. To do this, staff used cluster analysis and heat mapping of water right permits to identify areas of high potential water use. This process estimated just over 2,800 potential points of diversion within a quarter mile of streams mapped as native fish presence or potential. But note that actual diversions are likely much lower due to multiple water rights permitted at a single physical diversion. Areas with highest potential water diversion were identified in the Wood River area and below Link River Dam, circled in red. Hotspots represent the potential for higher risk to fish due to quantity of water diverted. And by focusing on these areas, we can increase efficiency in conducting landowner outreach and may generate cost savings in design and construction when diversion characteristics in an area are similar, or if there are opportunities to consolidate diversions behind a single screen. This effort to highlight the needs has helped in building capacity. The last legislative session created a new Klamath screening coordinator position to conduct outreach and collaborate with partners to identify, plan, and fund projects. And the return of salmon has increased the number of funding programs available to do this work. There are currently 56 known screens in the Klamath Basin, but likely many more have been installed independent of ODFW programs, particularly pump screens, which are often installed by landowners as part of irrigation efficiency projects. And we currently have 7 projects in progress that have been funded or in some stage of installation. Although much work remains to be done, I'm optimistic that the focus on screening that we're currently seeing in the basin, the access to additional funds, and increased in capacity to do this work will accelerate the rate of completion over the next few years. And with that, I think Mark and I are happy to answer any questions.
You want to start, Bert?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Commissioner
can't help
Hatfield.
it.
And then I'll.
I can't help but weigh in, right? So I have a little story to tell, which is you know, I've been involved in Klamath and restoration and ranching and things for like 30 years, but I was on a tour that wasn't related to ODF&W with Phil at Keno Dam right when these fish started to pass this fall. And that stretch of river between Keno and Klamath Falls is not necessarily the best water quality, or it's not the greatest spot in Klamath. And Phil and I are standing there on the dam talking, and you know, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Are these fish going to go on up? And Phil and I are kind of like, yeah, we're seeing them here. Big fish, right? These are big fish. But Phil's like, nah, I don't think they're going to make it up past Link River Dam. And I was like, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to. I don't believe that they will. You know, we are looking at a couple big fish right about then that we're flipping around. It was that night, I think, or the next day, Phil, that they passed into Upper Klamath Lake. And then that one, I call it a disperser, kind of like we do with wolves, made that, 20-hour run and ended up in the Sprague the next day. This is insane, people. This is really, really exciting times in Klamath. And I think the communities can feel it. They can feel it's like little presence of fish going everywhere. Very important to the tribal communities as well. But I think it's super important to acknowledge that when we removed dams in Klamath, we were changing a system, part of a system. by removing those dams. But what we haven't done is the level of restoration that was needed across the whole system to really welcome these fish with screening in place in a way that needs to be in place, with other restoration that keeps ag families feeling safe and like they have a future. So while we have an amazing moment in time, there's tremendous work that needs to be done in Klamath. But I just think of even Bill, and then I think of Mark, who presented this morning. I just think that ODF&W office down in Klamath has just been, I don't know, Mark, I'd like you to comment how it has felt to keep finding these Chinook salmon popping up all over the place above those link and in the lake. I would just love to hear your human perspective of what that has meant to you, because it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Hatfield Hyde. Yeah, we're all, it's hard to explain. I like to think that like every day is like Christmas around here. Like, so even like right now, we're all, we have staff out in the field doing spawning surveys, looking for coho salmon. We haven't spotted our first coho salmon yet this year. And I'm waiting any day for the staff to be super excited and see those first pictures of the year of coho salmon. And I don't know, it's exciting. We also have a lot of work to do. Like even just the monitoring is it's challenging and sometimes, but it's also very rewarding. Sometimes we're in the office just looking at videos of Chinook salmon pass by and trying to count them all as part of our ongoing effort to estimate escapement. But it's very exciting. All the staff, we have such great staff here. They're doing such a tremendous job.
Yeah, and so just thank you so much for that. It is basically like Christmas, fish gone crazy. Like, where would they be next? What's going on here? This is crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to build just a bit on Commissioner Hatfield Hyde's comments. There are a lot of pretty remarkable moments in this role. The Tillamook tour is one of them, where we saw what was happening with flooding, what was happening with dikes, and what was happening with the fish. And then also, and this is one of the ones where the department did a remarkable job of connecting things to the community and what we needed to do for the community in order to make headway for fish and what was going on in Tillamook. This one, though, this Klamath one is huge. And if I have bad days, the day that always comes to my mind is when Mark mentioned that the first fish was back, and it was just remarkable. He wasn't doing somersaults or flips, but it was pretty remarkable that they're back. It's an ongoing good story. I do have a question, probably for you, Phil, but maybe both of you. I'm curious, will you talk a little bit more about the newly reopened areas and what and how long it's going to take before we know they're established? And we're not looking at opportunity on those stocks yet, but could you talk about that a little bit more, just in terms of the newly opened areas and what's that, how much is there, what is it adding, and what's it going to take for them to be established?
Chair Wall, I can step in if Phil doesn't mind. Yeah, so like I mentioned in the presentation, these fish are, they're pioneers. They're I don't like to use the word stray, but they're moving into new habitat. They're explorers. We've opened up a whole bunch of new habitat and they're moving into it and exploring. And the amount of habitat that they're actually moving around in is pretty incredible. Then the next step really is to see where they're successfully reproducing and producing baby salmon. And that takes a pretty big effort, especially when we have hundreds of miles of habitat above Upper Klamath Lake. But we're pretty dedicated to figure that out, try to see where they're being successful, because they will be unsuccessful in some areas. So that's kind of the next step for our program, is to see where they're reproducing, kind of look at out-migration from that. We know from experimental juvenile spring run Chinook releases that we've been doing that downstream passage through Link River and Keno Dam is possible, and we've detected some of those fish going out to the mouth of the Klamath. And so, but really, there's going to be a lot of selection pressure on these fish is trying to establish.
Thank you. Really helpful. Remarkable report, too. Appreciate it. Any other questions, commissioners? Go ahead.
Thank you for that kind of summary of where we are. It is really amazing to see that there's been such quick response to the breachings, the openings of the passage for some audits going up into the Upper Klamath Basin. Clearly not easy, many years in the making, lots of intense public debate. So to see such rapid response is just fantastic. I guess just one question I have for you. You mentioned kind of a couple of things that still work to do, screening being one of them, and you expanded on kind of what the opportunities are ahead there. But you also mentioned improved passage at the remaining dams. Can you talk a little bit about what the status is for those projects?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Morrison, we have kind of a multi-pronged effort related to passage at primarily Keno Dam right now. The latter facility at Link River is newer, although we are finding that it could use some work as well. We've had great cooperation from Bureau of Reclamation with tweaking operations at both of those to address attraction flows and stuff like that. We have a grant from Bureau of Reclamation to look at designing and handing off to them plans for improved fish passage at Keno Dam. These are more short-term kind of repairs, modifications. I think of them a little bit as mitigations to get the best performance we can out of passage there, while we also are engaging with them on long-term solutions at Keno Passage or at Keno Dam. The current facility basically can't be modified or upgraded sufficiently to fully be compliant with state and federal standards. So we're going to try and do the best we can while we figure out the long-term solution. I think there's going to be some opportunity within that grant to also look at some of the work at Link River as well. And then I guess related to that, we also have a longer-term visioning process funded by NOAA, which is set up to engage the community to start the discussion around those long-term improvements at Keno Dam and what it's going to take to get there. Kind of a pre-feasibility or a pre-scoping sort of process.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Labhart.
Yeah, so Phil, as you're aware, OWEB did fund a significant amount of dollars in the removal of the dams. Just so you know, I think OWEB stands ready to assist you in Keno too, so be ready. So.
Yes.
Okay, we have that recorded. Well, thank you, Phil and Mark, for a great presentation. And I just want to say that this is a really big lift for staff. We wouldn't have the capacity right now with Mark and his team, but for the tremendous support that we got from our stakeholders to really make sure that the funding was in our budget for that capacity. And it's been years of really touch and go, and our stakeholders have come through to make sure we were in a position to do the kind of work that you're hearing about. And then I also just want to mention it is a lot of work, and I just really appreciate the fact that we are working side by side with the Klamath Tribe staff in the field. Really kind of, we can't be everywhere monitoring, so we're kind of like they're in some parts of the basin, we're in some parts of the basin. It's a true collaboration on the ground with their staff and our staff, and we're really grateful for that. So great work, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I can't help it. I just have to say one more thing, and those guys have left. But when we think about all the work that we do for Fish and Wildlife in Oregon and communities, I want to say that this process in Klamath and getting to this day had a lot to do with people softening towards each other at a time and listening to one another in ways that they never would have historically. So I would say the ag community listening to the tribes and the downstream tribes and them explaining how important it was for these fish to come back up into the upper basin was really politically fraught a lot of divisiveness. There's still issues in Klamath today over this. But at the end of the day, what I want to say is that there was a period of time where people behaved well with one another and they listened to one another carefully. And it mattered. And to me, what I want to say is that we, when some of the ag community chose to soften across the basin to these issues about dam removal and fish coming up, it was more about people relating to people and listening to others and hearing what was important to them. So for me, it was about relationship, not fish. It wasn't about the fish. Then I got to see the fish. And that was crazy. So it's also about the fish now. But it wasn't back then. So I just hope in Oregon we can do more of this softening to one another. Calm down, everyone. Maybe we could talk to each other again. And amazing things could happen. And with Klamath, I hope more amazing things happen because the ag communities need help. The fish screening needs help. We need to do literally hundreds of millions of dollars of restoration work in Klamath. So I'm so glad that Mark's beginning to fund that through OWEB. And OWEB wants to give more money even than that to Klamath. Okay, sorry. Advertisement.
Well said. Shall we go to temporary rules?
Yes, and just for, by way of explanation for our new commissioners, the commission has the authority to do administrative rules. But since we do in-season management of many of our fisheries, often the director, and the director has authority under statute to do emergency rulemaking in between your meetings. So that we can keep those fisheries moving in real time. And then each meeting, the director will bring forward any of those rules that we've promulgated and ask for you to ratify them. And so you'll see in your packet, there's six rules included, all of them related to kind of fish and marine programs. Things like, delaying the crab opening the partial opening. So those are the kinds of things that you'll see happening. And unless there's any question, just mention that you have 6 of them in your packet.
Thank you, Director. Any questions, commissioners? Or it looks like we have somebody ready to do go ahead, Commissioner Labhart.
Okay, so just a comment before I make the motion. If we didn't have this process set up, it would be an administrative nightmare of trying to come back to the commission, and we need to have this, as the director said, for emergencies. And so the process works really well, in my opinion. So, Madam Chair, I move to ratify the 6 temporary rules set forth on the December 12th, 2025 agenda.
I'll second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded to ratify the 6 temporary rules as was just read into the record. And we're going to do a thumbs up vote on this one, if we could, please. And it looks like unanimous, Michelle. So thank you. That one is taken care of. We don't have commission updates or new business or other business that we have to deal with. So we will move right to public forum. And we have several people lined up to speak on public forum. What I would like to do is name the first few, and then we'll go. I think most of them are in the room. So we will start, if we could, with Bill Monroe Jr., Bruce Hanson, Andrew Hanson, and then the next 3 would be Bob Reese, Jim Muck, and Dave Schwamp. So if Bill Monroe Jr., are the first 3, Michelle, here? Okay, then if Bruce and Andrew could come up. and maybe Bill will be. Thank you. Thank you.
Morning, Commission Chair Wall and Director Colbert. I'm Bruce Hanson, and I've been coming to these meetings and compact meetings for over 70 years. I'm going on 85 years old, and I've lived in Oregon my whole life. I was on the R&E board for almost 9 years when it was in its first concepted. And I've spent thousands and thousands of hours fishing. And today I come before you to tell you that the barbless hook in the Columbia River is not needed. And it's a detriment in a number of different ways. And there's been some changes since 2023. As far as the fishing tackle goes, the sportsmen now, all the new nets are fish friendly and they don't take the slime or scales off. The other thing has happened is they've gone to a Pro-Troll 360 spinner that goes around. And this thing goes around and around and around this little tiny spinner back here. And the fish nip at it. And I would say that well over 95% of the fishermen are using this now. It's something new since 2023. The other thing is we have a perfect example here in the Willamette River and the Multnomah Channel where we're able to use barbed hooks, and there is no morts floating after thousands of steelhead and salmon are caught in the Willamette and tributaries. You don't see them on the bank, you don't see them in the eddies or in the mainstream. And the barbed hooks are easy to take out with a needle nose pliers. And it's an extreme disadvantage to handicapped young people that are learning to fish. And we need more fishermen. And the salmon and steelhead are the biggest thing that's happening right now that I can see in all the years that I've fished. And is that we're in a big problem with thermal polluted water. It's a big thing in the Willamette. It's a big thing in the Columbia. And if we don't address the thermal pollution of the water, these fish, you pick them up now with the 78-degree water and they feel like a hot water bottle. And they deteriorate very fast too. You have to put them on ice right away. So I think we need to take a look at how we can get colder water and in the Willamette and the Columbia rivers. And it's very, very important. And that's about all I have today. If anybody has any questions, and I've seen everything, and I've been everywhere. And I also had a commercial fishing license. I gill netted with my grandfather, and so that's about all I have to say. And we don't need barbless hooks in the Columbia River. It's just not needed. And with the changing of the fishing equipment and everything, so I would hope that you would take a hard look at it. I also had a written testimony. I hope that you read that written testimony. Good. Thank you very much. I want to thank Michelle for getting that to you people. And there's a lot of thought went into it. And so.
Thank you, Bruce. And just so people know, we typically don't ask a lot of questions during public forum. What we do appreciate is that we get to hear things that aren't on the regular agenda. So we appreciate your time, and it's a lot of work to come down here and testify, so thank you. And we'll stop there because I don't see questions, and we do have your written information. And is Andrew Hansen in the room?
My son had had an emergency and he couldn't make it.
Thank
But he's
you.
a premium guide, and between him and I, we've fished over 125 years of knowledge.
Ah.
So we're well versed on how to catch fish.
It sounds like it.
We eat lots of
Thank you.
fish and lots of deer and
Yeah.
elk too. So thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it very much.
And we'll go to Bill Monroe Jr. online, if he's there. Then let's go to Bob Reese, and the next person would be Jim Muck. Bob?
Good morning. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Wall, Director Colbert, and members of the commission. My name is Bob Reese. I'm the Executive Director for the Association of Northwest Guides and Anglers Association, as well as the Conservation Director for the Association Northwest Steelheaders. Thank you for entertaining a conversation on the barbless hook rule on the main stem Columbia. Just a short bit ago, I submitted to the commission and to the director petition with 342 signatures asking the commission to direct staff to look at the pluses and minuses of rescinding the barbless hook rule on the main stem Columbia. There's a little more information about the history and the feelings of this rule from our sport fishing community. So I hope you get a chance to read that. But you know, just like many of the issues that this commission faces, there's a lot of complexity to rescinding the barbless hook rule. As I became educated when this issue came up here recently, you know, one of the downturns of it is the possibility of actually a reduction in opportunity from a days of opportunity for sport anglers on the main stem, which in a lot of cases, we already are extremely confined with those opportunities, which can impact the economic reach of our industry and our community to rural areas of Oregon. So hopefully in the already constrained times that the staff has to do its good work, that we can find some time to look at what the benefits and the downturns of rescinding the barbless hook rule. You've already heard, and you will have historically heard about the frustration that exists with the barbless hook rule on the main stem. And it sure be a nice benefit to be able to offer anglers some reprieve from some of that frustration. We just wonder at what cost that will come. So hopefully the staff will get a chance to do that for our community, and appreciate your dedication to the natural resources of Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. We'll go to Jim Muck then. And one thing I forgot to mention, I'm trying to remember some of the pieces that the new commissioners need to hear. We typically do these 3 minutes each. So yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Chair Wall, fellow commissioners, Director Colbert. My name is Jim Muck. Just a little background for some of the new commissioners. I worked for ODFW for about 30 years. I also worked for the National Marine Fisheries Service for about 11 years, and I initially started at private aquaculture for about 7. I had a good long run career, and I now spend all my time fishing. I'm here to talk about the barbless hooks. Barbed offer information that can help you on your decision. I fish the Columbia a lot. I am for removal of the barbless hooks, and so that we can use any hook and leave it up to the discretion of the fisherman. But the data that I want to offer is as a district bio in Clackamas, Roseburg, and an assistant district fish biologist in Coos Bay, we took broodstock collections. We went out and caught wild steelhead with our fishermen, and then took them back to the hatchery so that we could use them for broodstock, localized broodstock. That entailed putting them in a tank in a drift boat, put them in a tank at the end of the fishery, put them in a tank in my truck, running them down to the hatchery and leaving them there for a couple months till while we waited for them to mature up for spawning. Our mortalities were almost zero. hardly ever lost a fish. And if we did lose a fish, it was because the fish was taking too bright and it took a long time for the fish to mature up and then actually died in the hatchery. It wasn't really caused by the difference at hooks. All the hooks that we've used in the coastal streams that I was fishing was actually barbed hooks. And so using that data then shows that with a wild winter steelhead that the mortality is really low. Adult Chinook, when they come in, coho, when they're in the ocean, they do have a little tendency to give their scales off, but that quickly reverts in about a couple of days of them entering the freshwater, and we are talking about freshwater today. Those scales become hardened when you try to take the scales off, which I've done that a lot. They're hard to pull with the tweezers, and they really do firm up, and those fish just become a lot better at surviving versus comparing to an ocean conditioned fish. And most of the mortalities that people address are talking about ocean conditioned fish. And so we're really talking about freshwater. I really believe that the mortality and the agency can review their hatchery data then, for these data are available to show that these mortality rates are extremely low. And I think that's acceptable then, that it's probably about 2 to 3%, and it's really based on temperature. Some of these fish just have a hard time in the late summer when it's warm water, and more than it is the actual fishery going from there. So in summary then, I just want to mention, I believe that the difference between hooked, barbed, and barbless is acceptable fishery management thing. And it's one thing that the agency can finally give back to the anglers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And I know we'll see you in a few minutes, but Dave Champ? Looks like he might be right here. Go ahead, Dave, and you also will have 3 minutes if you.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair Wall, Commissioners, Director Colbert. For the record, my name is Dave Champ. I live in Lebanon, Oregon, and I'm here representing the Oregon chapter of the Coastal Conservation Association, CCA. We are encouraged that the Commission is showing an interest in reviewing the barbless hook requirement on the Columbia River. The barbless hook rule implemented as part of the Columbia River reforms continues to be a major concern and basis of complaint by our members. And something tells me that more than one of you have heard a complaint about this yourselves. Science suggests that there are no appreciable conservation benefits gained by using barbless hooks in freshwater salmon fisheries. ODF&W has shown their concurrence by removing such restrictions largely throughout the state where they once existed, except on the Columbia. While we recognize the situation on the Columbia is unique and presents added regulatory challenges, it's time to seriously consider change. CCA strongly supports eliminating the use of barbless hooks for the winter, spring, and summer salmon and steelhead fisheries in the Columbia. This should also apply to fall fisheries where the retention of wild fish is allowed, for example, zones 4 and 5. And these changes should be implemented as soon as possible. Because lower river fall fisheries could be subject to adjustments in the post-release mortality rate, possibly resulting in less days on the water in the lower river fisheries, CCA feels it's important to better understand those possible implications. To provide decision makers and users a clearer picture, ODF&W should conduct modeling to determine what impact a return to the higher release mortality rate would have on conservation and harvest opportunities before your commission acts on those fall fisheries. Longer term, we urge ODF&W to review the current hook and release mortality rate applied to the fall fisheries, evaluate recent scientific studies, and consider initiating a study specific to the Columbia. CCA supported continuation of the Columbia River endorsement, which could be a source of funds to cover the cost of that study. I've also attached a one-page summary of CCA's perspective on this important issue, along with a copy of a very recent scientific analysis of catch and release impacts on salmon and steelhead. The ink hasn't actually dried on that study. It's that fresh, and I would encourage you to have a look at it. It is looking at data from the states of Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And I think you'll find the analysis to be very interesting and compelling. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this important matter. We encourage you to move forward as quickly as possible, and we offer our help and support. And Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Dave, and we do have your document.
Great.
So thank you. We will then go, I just want to mention, because we're going to change topics a bit, other people on public forum are going to a new topic. The commissioners already know this, but we do have an informational item soon on this same issue. So now we're going to James Frazier and then Jim Muck again. So James and Jim, if you both want to come up. Go ahead, James.
Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde, members of the commission, and Director Colbert. My name is James Fraser, and I'm the Oregon Policy Director at Trout Unlimited. TU is a nonprofit dedicated to conserving cold water fish, such as trout, salmon, and steelhead in their habitats. We have thousands of members in Oregon, and our national staff includes more than a dozen folks who live in rural parts of the state and spend their days restoring fish passage, habitat, and in-stream flows. I have a couple brief comments mostly related to the Lower Columbia Recovery Plan assessment, which you'll hear at later in today's meeting. TU has been involved at the staff and grassroots level with both completing projects referenced in the assessment and in providing input on the recovery plan's implementation. For instance, in recent years, our Clackamas River chapter has conducted multiple phases of large-scale habitat restoration in the Clackamas headwaters in partnership with the Forest Service, ODFW, and many others, with a goal of restoring especially important spawning areas for salmon and steelhead. These places were degraded by land practices on the national forest decades ago and are already returning to a healthier previous condition that's better able to support spawning and rearing. We commend the ODFW staff who put the assessment together and who are doing the work which makes the progress in this report possible. I wish to highlight just a couple items in the assessment. First, TU applauds efforts to recover Lower Columbia River chum salmon. Results have been mixed, but we believe this is a great use of hatchery supplementation strategies to support recovery and reintroduction, which should continue to be prioritized in this setting. We also appreciate and support the approach of using Young's Bay as a control population to compare with and evaluate reintroduction efforts in other watersheds. Second, there are some real bright spots in the assessment related to recovery in the Cascade stratum, especially in the Clackamas and Sandy rivers. Significant work to address limiting factors, including habitat restoration, fish passage, and harvest management, appear to be paying off, with abundances of some key populations like Sandy River winter steelhead and Clackamas River coho nearing and even exceeding their delisting targets in recent years. I'll stop there with regard to the assessment and use my remaining time to touch upon the Klamath update that you received. I suspect a lot of folks in the room are still thinking about Mark's fantastic update, and I just wanted to relay Trout Unlimited's great appreciation for Philip and Mark and their team. TU's largest office in Oregon is in Klamath Falls, so I have a number of colleagues whose primary responsibility is working collaboratively with landowners and other partners on habitat and fish passage projects in the basin. We've also worked with Mark's team on the active reintroduction of spring chinook in the upper basin using hatchery stock from California's portion of the watershed. I've only ever heard glowing reports about Mark and his team within TU, and it's clear why from today's update. Their monitoring efforts have been massive this year, especially the carcass surveys, since so many fish showed up in 2025. This is exciting stuff, and we look forward to continuing our work with ODFW. I will end there. We appreciate the staff and commission's time and attention to these topics, and thank you.
Thank you, James. Go back to you, Jim. It's been a while.
Chair Wall, fellow commissioners, Director Colbert. I just want to talk a little bit about the assessment. It's an opportunity to really step back once in a while and see where we are on population analysis. 670,000 fish are coming back to the Columbia. That is not much. We used to have 12 to 15 million. We need to, when we do an assessment, really say, what are we measuring? When we look at habitat, I want to throw it out because we talk about our successes. It's really easy to say, well, we spent 30 million and here's all the projects we did. How many more fish did we produce? That's really the question. How many fish do we produce? Are we increasing these 670,000? We've spent $30 billion in the Columbia. And I don't think the answer is really a good one. And I think we need to look up then and say, how are we assessing this? When we look at a watershed project, we need to really get critic hard. I did that when I was working there all the time. And I think, when we talked to Commissioner Labhart about some of those reviews, again, how many fish are we creating? When we look at the assessment, one thing that concerns me a lot, we're using PHOS as our primary assessment. PHOS is really just a percent hatchery fish in the wild. When I was a district bio, we looked at all those lower Columbia tributaries, and in 2000, NOAA did not list them because they said, well, it wasn't really warranted as a species at that time. I worked through ODFW and said, we're finding juveniles everywhere as hatchery fish, quote, strayed into those streams, or as said in the Klamath Basin, recolonize those streams, which is both ways still a good thing. We started seeing juveniles, so we wrote a recovery plan, which I worked with Bob Hooten and Mark Chilcote, and the state listed them. And now those fish are in the tributaries. I want to clarify, those fish are all hatchery fish offspring. And so when we talk about PHOS, we really should mention once in a while is our hatchery fish are actually contributing to recovering runs. And so therefore today we've got a run going over the Willamette that is over 60,000 fish that are the same genetics as the lower Columbia fish. And our geneticists cannot tell those fish apart. And so when we use PHOS as a driver then and say, we just need to cut fisheries, that's all you're saying. And so I would really look at the assessment would look more closer at habitat, abundance numbers, and really use those criteria when we're looking at recovery so that we're on the right track and we don't come back 30 years from now and say, geez, Jim, you spent another 30 billion. Have you done any good? Because people are starting to ask those questions now, and the value of our restoration money and how it's spent, and are we seeing the population number rebound like we'd hope to? Thank you.
Thank you, Jim and James. Now we have three people who are virtual. Ben and Ticknap, Dolores Parch, and Francine Kershaw. Ben? Oh, did I miss one? Sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Hi.
Ben.
Good morning, Chair Wall, members of the commission.
I virtual.
I am Ben Entiknap, and I'm representing Oceana. I'm Oceana's Fisheries Campaign Director and a senior scientist. Oceana is an international organization working to protect the world's oceans. And I'm here today to speak to a petition that we submitted yesterday to reduce whale entanglements in the Oregon Dungeness crab fishery. Unfortunately, the Oregon commercial Dungeness crab fishery is entangling and killing threatened and endangered whales in increasing numbers. And these entanglements are not authorized and in violation of the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act. This is punctuated most recently by a juvenile humpback whale that was washed up on the central Oregon coast, entangled in Oregon crab gear, that had to be euthanized. And I think that was a very public display of this issue that is affecting our coast and is yet to be resolved. Increasingly, whales are being entangled off the West Coast. In 2024, there were the highest numbers entangled since 2018. And so we know that the conservation measures that are currently in place are not working. And that's why we are compelled to submit this petition. We need to take stronger actions. There is a solution, and that is to align Oregon's conservation measures with the best available science. And that's what we've done in our proposal, is to strengthen Oregon's existing rules to reduce entanglement risk in line with the science that shows the distribution and the timing of the whales off the Oregon coast. The second piece is to prohibit the use of the conventional pot gear starting in April, and that's when the whales have peak concentration off of our coast in overlap with the commercial fishery, effective in 2028. And we say that because we need still time to transition to whale-safe pop-up gear. Whale-safe pop-up gear is a really innovative tool that's being effectively used now in fisheries around the world. to remove the vertical line that's entangling the whales. And so sending an acoustic signal from the boat to the seafloor triggers a release mechanism. The pots can come up on demand and you remove that threat. The California Dungeness crab fishery has been using this gear now for the past 3 years. Last year, they set over 25,000 traps using pop-up gear, harvested 218,000 pounds of crab at a value of $1.4 million. This works. It's effective. It's whale safe. We want to continue to move the Oregon Dungeness crab fishery to a whale safe fishery, but we need stronger incentives and stronger rules to get them there. So that's why we've submitted this petition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. And sorry for thinking you were virtual when you were sitting
No,
right
it's-
there. So we do have one question from Commissioner Labhart.
Well, it's mainly for either council or the director. So it's an APA petition, Administrative Procedures Act petition. So for the benefit of the two new commissioners, they're probably wondering petition, what's that mean? Just could you briefly explain what happens when we receive an APA petition, just real quickly, so everybody understands what happens now? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Commissioner Labhart. So the commission received this petition yesterday, and you have 90 days to respond to the petition. Honestly, I haven't even looked at it yet, given that it just came in yesterday. So we'll be working to schedule it before you within that time period according to, and then at that point, you'll be deciding whether you want to deny the petition or approve the petition and initiate rulemaking. Thank you,
Second.
Commissioner Labhart.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good. Thank you, Ben. We'll go to Dolores Parch and Francine Kershaw online, Ben.
Good
Dolores?
morning. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Dolores Porch. I live in Albany, Oregon. I am a certified Oregon naturalist through the OSU Extension Service. I am a member and volunteer with the Oregon chapter of the American Cetacean Society. And I've also been a volunteer with the Oregon Parks and Recreation during the yearly whale watching spoken here program. Oregon is unique among the states that it actively promotes whale watching on its coast and every year invites the world to observe these magnificent creatures and to learn about their life histories. In 2022, which are the latest figures I have, Travel Oregon stated that over $12 million was spent by visitors to the Oregon coast. According to the OSU School of Forestry Outdoor Recreation Report in 2022, Oregonians spent $200 billion on whale watching activities. Whales encased in fishing gear, specifically crabbing fishing gear, and that get beached on our shores is not the invitation Oregonians wish to promote. 4 humpback whales in fishing gear for the past 2 years is unacceptable. I urge the commission to enact emergency rules for the 2026 commercial crabbing season that would address this issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dolores. Let's go to Francine Kershaw then.
Good morning, Chair Wall and Commissioners. My name is Francine Kershaw and I'm a senior scientist with the Natural Resources Defense Council. My comments directly follow those of my colleagues at Oceana and the American Cetacean Society. NRDC is extremely concerned about the ongoing risk of accidental entanglement posed to whales by the Oregon commercial Dungeness crab fishery. Preliminary results released by the federal government indicate that 4 in 5 entanglements may go undetected off the West Coast, meaning that the 4 humpback whales confirmed to have been entangled this year are likely a signal of a far greater entanglement problem. Current regulations are insufficient and need to be strengthened and updated to reflect the best available science. The changes proposed in the petition will serve to immediately reduce risk, providing a stepping stone to the proposed closure to conventional gear in the spring, starting in 2028. The proposed amendments also include a regulatory pathway to authorize pop-up fishing gear and incentives for the fleet to test and adopt this technology. Pop-up gear is a proven means to fish pots and traps without vertical buoy lines suspended in the water column, thus eliminating entanglement risk. As been explained, Dungeness crab fishers in California landed several £100,000 of whale-safe crab worth millions of dollars over both the 2024 and 2025 spring fishing seasons, when the fishery was closed to conventional gear to prevent entanglements. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife confirmed yesterday at the Fish and Game Commission meeting that they will authorize pop-up gear for commercial use during the spring fishing season, starting on April 1st, 2026. And we believe the same success is possible in Oregon. We appreciate the continued work of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to reduce entanglement risk and the willingness shown by members of the Oregon crab fleet to consider solutions. We remain encouraged by the knowledge exchange on pop-up gear that took place in August this year and the department's commitment to establish an EFP program to test pop-up gear. It is our intention that the proposed regulatory changes complement this ongoing work, and we are also committed to continuing to foster collaborative, open, and solution-oriented dialogue on this issue. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you, Francine. And we will go then to someone from the Desert Springs Trout Farm, and I don't have a name, but we have the, then we'll go to, thank you. We'll go to the next person, Heath Heikala, and then we'll come back to the person who just stepped out of the room. Is Heath here? Or is he? Heath, are you online?
I am. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
Hey, good morning, Chair Wall, Commissioners, Director Colbert. Heath Heikala here on behalf of CCA, Coastal Conservation Association, and I serve both the states of Oregon and Washington here, and you heard from Dave Shamp already on the Columbia River issue. I wanted to talk with you about a more local issue that was brought to us, and actually we sent a letter to the Commission and the Director back in September, and it has to do with the commercial fishing sanctuary at the mouth of the Sandy River, where the Sandy River meets the Columbia. It's actually a little picture of the eastern mouth here behind me. And the issue that we've identified here, and we really would ask that the Department and Commission look at, is that due to some recent changes to kind of the outflow there, due to habitat restoration, other natural activities, more of the flow is now coming out the eastern mouth of the Sandy River, and that's kind of what you see behind me. And during low flows in particular, which are quite common during August and September when commercial fishing activity is taking place in the Columbia River, the river gets very low. And the current boundary of the sanctuary, and these sanctuaries are, of course, in place at the mouths of rivers to provide, some added protection to fish that are staging to return to the river. The current boundary line just does not provide, in our view, adequate protection when the river flows get low. And two ways. One, the river dries out a fair bit. And I've sent you some images that you should have received where you can get an idea of how low actually the water gets. And the current sanctuary boundary may actually be on dry land when the river flows are very low. The other thing that happens is more and more of the flow starts coming out and actually flowing upriver, up there behind Gary Island, and you can see that island in the middle of the river. And the current boundary really ends at the westernmost point of this eastern mouth, so it doesn't include any of these areas. So I'm going to be followed by someone else who's actually a local resident there and spends a lot of time on the water in the area. But I do appreciate you taking a look at the issue. Sorry I couldn't be there with you in person. I enjoyed being on the Hatchery Resilience Task Force and opportunities continue to work with you all. So that'll end my comments, and I know we've got someone local who's going to comment. So thank you.
Thank you, Heath. We will come to the local person in just a minute, but the person from Desert Springs Trout Farm, if you will come up, please, and you also will have 3 minutes. And the next person online will be Evan Burke, and after that, Kristen Cook, who I believe is here.
Hello, can you hear me there?
Yes.
My name's
Thomas McDonald.
Oh, I'm sorry. It sounds, Evan, I'm going to go ahead with the person that's in the room, and then I'll come right back to you. Sorry for
Sure
the
thing.
misunderstanding. Go ahead.
My name's Thomas McDonald. I own Desert Springs Trout Farm in Summer Lake, Oregon. It's the most unique
hatchery operation in the United States. We sit on a vast body of water. It comes out of the ground at 6 pounds of pressure. We've got, we raise over 400,000 pounds of trout that we plant and another 200,000 pounds of fish that we sell on the meat market on a vegetarian diet with no mercury or anything. Pregnant woman eats it 7 days a week. Our water's 59 degrees, never changes temperature. We can raise a 2-pound fish in 12 months. We sell all the eastern Sierras from the Walker River in California to Shaver Lake down below Fresno. We sell to the Shoshone Paiutes. We're certified in all western states to deliver fish. Our water is pure, clean, artesian water. There's nothing like it around. I'm here to talk about the money on the Army Corps projects. ODF&W is, Bill Bradbury did an audit in 2003 at $6.16 a pound for trout and salmon. ODF&W is selling fish to the Army Corps of Engineers at $4.75 a pound. We're talking millions of dollars on these contracts, and they're selling way below their cost. There's a part in here that shows you where we got the numbers. We went from 2003 to 2023, and at the bottom three, they had $8.57 a pound for 2021, $9.43 a pound for 2022, and $11.25 a pound for 2023. And they bid 408, 445, and 450 on those contracts. We're talking 25 years later on a $6.16, and they're $2 a pound under. They're over $7 a pound short. Who's making up all this money? We've been bidding on these contracts, and we got one of them from and had it for 4 years, fulfilled the contract. Ever since then, ODF&W has been bidding way below their cost. And there's a letter in there from Debbie Cobart in 2000, and let me see, that was 3 years ago, in front of Senator Golden's committee, and she said, all the documentation's in there, she could deliver fish for $1.68 a pound. We can't compete in this.
If you could wrap up, we've used up your time, unfortunately.
We can't compete in this market when we have somebody selling that far below cost. And who's paying the difference? Because you don't run into business. You don't, if you're selling below cost, you lose money. And I'd really like to see something done about it. And we have been battling ODF&W for 30 years now, and they've tried everything under the sun to break our company, and they're still doing it. And we're getting tired of it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. And we'll go then next to Evan Burke. Thank you.
All right. If you can hear me there,
Yes.
I wanted to follow up on the Sandy River Delta issue that Heath brought up a few minutes ago. So my name's Evan Burke. I'm just a local fisherman. I live very close to that location, and that's kind of my home fishing waters during the fall. I'm there several times a week and see the activity there and what the patterns of the fish. And I've taken videos and stuff and sent to CCA and stuff showing where the fish stage with my live scope, and showing just literally hundreds of coho salmon and Chinook salmon staging in an area that lies way outside the current boundary. So like he said, the current boundary is mostly on dry land. I would say almost entirely on dry land at that time of year, especially at low tide. So current boundary, I would say, might as well not even exist. It's not accomplishing anything. The upper mouth flows east and is flowing in well outside of that boundary. The fish are staging in 30 to 40 feet of water well outside that boundary. Just in my observation, seeing those fish weeks at a time, staging there and being in there by the hundreds, something that I have observed on multiple occasions over the last several years is being there in an afternoon or evening and stopping into this staging spot and using my live scope, counting the fish, seeing them rolling around, jumping, seeing them by the hundreds. And then the commercial netters go in that night, and I would come back the next day, and where previously I was spotting hundreds of fish staging. There's been times where the next day after a netting I've spotted zero, literally overnight. I have seen similar things on weather events, but you'll still see a few here and there. Like after a rain, the fish move upstream, but on certain nettings, I have seen pretty much the entirety of the staging fish completely disappear. So yeah, that about sums it up. Like Heath has already pointed out, the layout of the area has completely changed as with restoration efforts. The lower the water gets, the more percentage of the sandy outflow comes out of the eastern mouth. The western mouth is more of the primary mouth during high flows, but during the low flows of the fall, the water is primarily coming out of that eastern mouth that dumps in right by Gary Island there. So I would say the new boundary would be better starting at at least the wing dam right there at Gary Island on the eastern edge at the very least, and going up to mid-river, which is not even remotely close to where the current boundary is. And that sums up everything I have.
Thank you, Evan. We have two more people. Kristen Cook, who I have down for being in the room. And then I understand that Bill Monroe is now online. So, there you are. Go ahead, come on up. And we'll go to you next then, Bill.
Okay.
And you also will have 3 minutes, if you will, Kristen.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners, Chair Wall, and Director Colbert. Okay, my name's Kristen Cook. I'm the owner of Sauvie Island Cove Market and Tallulah Ruby Boutique on Sauvie Island. I'm here today to discuss the detrimental effects the parking permit changes have had in the last 2 years on my business and the other small businesses on the island. The permit system has been working fine for over 20 years and yet was abruptly changed last year. These changes were made with no communication or effort from the ODFW to ensure the local businesses were not adversely affected. I hope that I will get some support from my small business and the ODFW will not continue the disastrous checkpoint and reservation system started this year. A little backstory, we've been in business for 9 years and have sold over $1 million worth of parking permits for the ODFW. We survived COVID. We are very well established and have a loyal fan base. We have a market which provides snacks and beach toys, umbrellas for people to sit under, play checkers, watch the birds. Up until last year, our sales were going up, and many customers come to us to get their annual parking permit. It's their tradition and something they look forward to, and of course, purchase many other items. Unfortunately, last year in the middle of our season, the ODFW came in with zero prior communication, no consultation, no appointment, and informed us they were no longer going to be allowing us to sell the prepaid annual permits. And eventually dailies, unless we switch to an online system that's not doable for our store. I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under us, and I felt so deflated after working so hard to be completely dismissed and unappreciated, and to have the ODFW feel like they don't care about the small businesses on the island. This year I started with fresh hope, knowing that we still get tons of traffic, and invested in more product. We get many people that drive after visiting the farms to sightsee, with many tourists as well. So I was planning on the high traffic to get us through the year, even though we did not have the annual permit. Once again, the ODFW pulled the rug out from under us in the middle of the season. The week before 4th of July, they came in with no prior communication, no appointment, and informed us they were going to be starting a secondary reservation pass with a checkpoint. Needless to say, we knew, as we all knew it would be, it was a disaster. It was exhausting trying to explain to people. There was mass confusion, people yelling at us, people not being able to get on their cell phones to get reservation passes. It was embarrassing to try to explain this to the customers. I have a lot more to say, but not enough time. I am pleading in my case for the small business and the other small business on the island that the ODFW does not do the checkpoint or reservation pass in the 2026 season. It was unnecessary and harmful to the businesses, the local visitors, and the many tourists who come to take scenic drives, which they were not allowed to do. Their choice to do this last year and this year contributed to my business being down almost 30% from last year, which was already down 15% from the year before due to the removal of the annual parking permits from our store. At a time when international tourism has plummeted, we need to make visiting easier, not more complicated. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for coming and testifying. Appreciate it. We next will go to Bill Monroe.
Yep.
On
Chair
the-
Wall, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Well, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here. Is my time started?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon or good morning, commissioners. My name is Bill Monroe Jr. I heavily involved in fisheries and recreational fisheries at that, whether it be a dynamic list of whether it's user groups, guides, what have you. I'm on the Recreational Advisory Committee for the Compact of the Columbia for Washington and Oregon. Basically, I'm just telling you that I'm extremely passionate in fisheries. And today, I'm just going to come to you with this. You guys have a huge list of just dynamic issues in front of you, and that is daunting. You guys have a lot of work to do, and I don't envy anything about the job that you have in front of you and all the things. It's very dynamic. Just as all the managers, I say at the same time, I don't want your job. It's just crazy. I'm actually coming to you from a little bit of a work right now, so I'm taking some time out because I couldn't make it to the meeting today. I think the last commission meeting, I spoke about the barbless hook and the whole enforcement thereof, the rule that is actually constraining fisheries. I know we've turned it into a conservation tool now, and I'm highly concerned about that. The rest of the fisheries that we work hard to conserve and have conservation methods like the Willamette, Tillamook, Rogue, Chetco, blah, 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 you name it. Those are all conservation-oriented fisheries, and we still don't have a barbless hook rule there. We do on the Columbia because of the fact that it is a political nightmare. And we have that in front of you now, and we don't want to, attack this certain thing. And here I am wanting to at least introduce myself to not only new commissioners, but to you guys as well to say yet again, I'd like to see the barbless hook rule removed and find ways to maybe use adaptive management in the Columbia like we do to be able to get, if it's going to be more angling days or however staff is going to approach that, we can probably do that together and make this work. We've got commissioners that are like in full support, and I need you to know you have a 100% backing of your constituents, which are the people who buy licenses. We are here and we want this and we have your back. And that's what this is all about. I'm not going to take up any more time today. I just want you to know that I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate you taking time off from work. And that is the end then of public forum. Commissioners, I think what I'd like to do, if we could, is go to Exhibit A, the minutes, and then we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back for we have two substantial informational items would be the next on the agenda, including one on barb and barbless hooks that you just heard some about. So let's go to the minutes. Are there any questions? We have two sets of minutes that were in the packet, and we need to revise or approve both sets, if you will. Any questions? If not, could I get a motion on this? And while we're waiting for the motion, I do want to mention that there is a blue Honda with their lights on Just glad it's not my car. So blue Honda with your lights on. Go ahead, Commissioner Spellbrink.
Okay, I move to approve September 12th and October 10th, 2025 meeting minutes and with continued authority to correct grammar and punctuation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve September 12th and October 10th, 2025 meeting minutes as was just read into the record. Commissioners, can we get a thumbs up on this one? Unanimous, Michelle. And so 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we have two really important informational items. So thank you. 10 minutes.
Fine, fine.
Hitting like a
There's a
really
lot.
typical deal of what happens. So you're gonna be like, yay.
Yeah. roller coaster.
Dave wants to make all the main motions instead of.
Right on.
Looks like we have a,
And, I don't know if you're mentioned the yellow card. That's a good signal if you want to talk.
Yeah.
Put it up, and it comes through to
I
know
know.
who's interested. Okay, I kind of figured that out. I was like,
we're just going to take a few more minutes on the technical stuff, so go ahead and talk. It. Go ahead, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, members of the commission, Director Colbert. For the record, I'm Tom Stahl. I'm the Deputy Administrator for Inland Fish. And Jim and Chris and I are going to talk to you today about the 12-year assessment of the Lower Columbia River Conservation Recovery Plan for salmon and steelhead. It's a pretty big plan and pretty big assessment, but we're going to try and do our best to boil it down for you. And we think we do have some good examples of the partnerships that you were talking about earlier, Chair Wall and Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde. So there's some good things in here. So the Lower Columbia River Plan, I'm just going to give an overview of the plan first before we get into the assessment of it. The plan was approved by the commission in 2010 after about 6 to 8 years of development. The plan serves as both a state conservation plan as well as a federal recovery plan for 4 different species, which are all listed as threatened under the federal ESA. And Lower Columbia River coho are also listed under the state ESA. So the 4 species are Lower Columbia River coho, Lower Columbia River chinook, Lower Columbia River steelhead, and Columbia River chum. One thing to note here, the map indicates the area of the listed domain that we're going to be talking about. That's the Oregon portion of these listed units. These listed units, however, do go into Washington as they're being evaluated for whether or not they stay on the endangered species list or when they were put on it. So we're really focusing on the Oregon portion of the listed range here today. And the plan itself had an implementation timeline of 25 years. So as with all of the conservation and recovery plans that we develop, there's a adaptive management component. We know that management is not going to stay static, and we need the ability to kind of see how things are going and adjust as needed. There were a couple mechanisms in that plan to indicate adaptive management actions. One, we do annual reports for this plan, which are available on our website. We also work with NIMS to provide them data for their 5-year status reviews. The last 5-year status review by NIMS was done in 2022. The conclusion of that status review was that all 4 of these species should remain at threatened. So no deterioration in any of the species. But what we're going to talk to you about today really is this 12-year assessment, which is more of a big check-in on the adaptive management and how are we doing. The 12-year assessment is contained in the attachments to the commission agenda item. There's a lot there. There's the main document, which has a good executive summary as well as 6 different sections in it. There's also an appendix that goes over the hundreds of actions and their status that were in the plan. There's also an appendix that reviews and updates the chum recovery strategy. That was a big focus in the original plan because chum were functionally extirpated and we wanted to reintroduce them. And then lastly, the 3rd appendix gets into the nitty-gritty details of all the measurable criteria that are in the plan. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris to go over the 12-year assessment results.
All right, thanks, Tom. Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, Commissioners, Director Colbert. For the record, I'm Chris Lorian, ODF&W's Native Fish Conservation Coordinator. And I'm going to provide a high-level overview of the 12-year assessment of the plan populations. And so the plan identified specific methods and measurable criteria that we would use for this assessment. And so we followed this direction to assess coho salmon, Chinook salmon, and steelhead populations in Oregon covered by the plan. Chum salmon were not assessed because we currently don't have any self-sustaining populations in the Oregon tributaries to the Columbia River. But we will talk more about chum salmon recovery later in the presentation. So we'll start with lower Columbia River coho salmon. And so there are 8 populations in Oregon, shown in green on the map on the right, and including one that's shared with Washington. In the plan, 5 of these populations were designated as primary populations that need to achieve a low or very low extinction risk in the delisting scenario. In the original plan assessment, extinction risk for these populations ranged from moderate to very high, so all of them needed significant uplift to reach their recovery goals. In the 12-year assessment, one of the primary populations, Clackamas coho salmon, achieved the interim abundance and productivity goal that was identified in the plan. And although the other 4 primary populations did not achieve the goal, we observed a stable or increasing abundance trend in these populations. So focusing in on Clackamas coho salmon, this figure shows the increasing trend in spawner abundance we've observed since the early 2000s. And in recent years, the population has exceeded the delisting abundance goal in the plan. This trend has coincided with significant fish passage improvements at Portland General Electric facilities in the basin and major habitat restoration achievements by agency, tribal, watershed council, and other partners, including Trout Unlimited, as was mentioned earlier. Let's see.
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties moving the slide forward here.
It's okay, all these technical difficulties
Ah,
this
thank you.
morning, you guys.
All right.
It's the digital forest. That's what my husband calls it.
Thanks for your patience. So moving on to lower Columbia River Chinook salmon, there are 12 populations in Oregon, including 10 fall Chinook populations and 2 spring Chinook populations. 6 of these were designated as primary populations that again need to achieve that low or very low extinction risk in the plan's delisting scenario. We found that 2 populations, Sandy late fall Chinook and Sandy spring Chinook, achieved the interim abundance and productivity goal in our assessment. And like Clackamas coho, these populations have consistently approached or exceeded the delisting goal in recent years. Our monitoring results, including new monitoring that came online following plan approval, has shown that abundance is generally very low in the other 4 primary Chinook populations. And in some cases, these populations appear to be functionally extirpated, meaning that we see very few individuals on the spawning grounds. Then they do not appear to be part of a functioning, self-sustaining population. And so they may require more direct intervention to make progress towards our recovery goals. And finally, the lower Columbia River steelhead distinct population segment includes 6 populations in Oregon, including 2 that are shared with Washington. And 5 of these are winter steelhead populations, and we have 1 summer steelhead population on the Oregon side of the river. There are fewer steelhead populations than coho and Chinook because several populations shown in the stippling here on the figure downstream from the Willamette River are part of a separate DPS or listing unit under the ESA that's not listed under the ESA. And so they were still part of our assessment, but they're not part of the listed unit that of lower Columbia River steelhead. So 4 of the steelhead populations in Oregon were designated as primary, and we found that 2 of them achieved the interim abundance and productivity goal, Sandy winter steelhead and Hood winter steelhead. And in the other 2 primary populations, we saw either a stable trend or we had limited data in 1 case for assessment. So Sandy winter steelhead were another really bright spot in the assessment. This population was considered to have a high extinction risk in the plan's original assessment, but as you can see in the graph, we've consistently exceeded the delisting scenario abundance goal over the last 12 years in this population. And dam removal and a really strong habitat restoration program in the basin have both likely contributed to the improvements we've observed. So again, a great success story in really moving the dial on these fish populations. So to briefly sum up the assessment, since 2010, we've made significant progress toward recovery goals for the Clackamas and Sandy populations, but we haven't made the same level of progress toward population goals elsewhere. But monitoring has improved and provided more clarity on what recovery gaps are in the other places, and including some new information that showed that some of the assumptions we had going into the plan needed to be updated and rethought, and then also where we need to focus our efforts moving forward. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jim to talk about plan implementation.
Good morning, Chair Wall, Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde, Commissioners, Director Colbert. For the record, this is Jim Brick. I'm the Recovery Plan Coordinator for the Lower Columbia River Salmon and Steelhead Recovery Plan with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. The plan actually I'm here to talk to you about the plan implementation portion of our presentation. And so the plan actually identified actions to address limiting factors and threats in 6 broad categories shown on the slide. Each of these categories could be a presentation in its own. And so on the following slides, I'm just going to cover some of the highlights for 3 of the categories on the left. The 3 categories on the right are important, and estuary habitat management is mostly led through the Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership. Hydropower management is mostly led through the Federal Columbia River Power System's biological opinion, and predation remains a large unknown and is addressed through 3 predation reports in the assessment. The assessment provides a more detailed summary for all 6 categories, and Appendix 1 and Appendix 3 of the assessment provides an even more detailed review of action implementation. Oh, thank you. So tributary habitat is one of those three general threats that we talked about. And habitat restoration goals are one of 6 criteria we use to evaluate the listing factor, present and threatened destruction, modification, or curtailment of a species habitat or range. And the quantity of habitat restoration actions needed varied with each of the 9 population areas. And that is related to the conservation gap, which was the difference between the population status when we adopted the plan and what our desired status was. There were the 4 restoration type actions are the number of miles of large woody debris added, the miles of riparian area treated, the miles of side channel created or activated, and the number of square meters of off-channel habitat. The Sandy and the Youngs Bay populations were the only units through areas to achieve all the goals for each restoration type, and the Clackamas and the Scappoose units achieved goals for riparian and square meters of off-channel habitat. What's important here is the greatest driver to achieving these restoration goals is the capacity of the local implementers to build large partnerships, which lead to more numerous, larger sized, and more impactful restoration projects. Harvest management. The evaluation pertains to the listing factor overutilization for commercial recreation and scientific or educational purposes. Authorized take for coho and fall chinook is guided by abundance-based management matrices, which are approved by NOAA yearly, and they're scaled to, take limits are scaled to the run size. Harvest control by abundance-based management matrices were designed to improve escapement across all fish populations. Evaluation of alternative commercial fishing gear and implementing market selective mainstem commercial fisheries when feasible are planned actions, as well as former Columbia River salmon fishery management reform of 2012. Implementing these actions are a very delicate balancing act of assessing pros and cons of gear types, as well as shifting commercial harvest locations to reduce impacts on less abundant populations, reduce PHOS, and increased harvest opportunity. Hatchery management is the third and final one that we'll touch base on right now. Hatchery management, I'm sorry. All hatchery programs are highly regulated through NOAA, through the Federal Columbia River Power System and Mitchell Act biological opinions. And these hatcheries provide opportunities for ocean, select area enhancement, and Columbia River mainstem fisheries. Approximately 75% of salmonid harvest in the Columbia River below Bonneville Dam, and this includes all of the ESUs, not just lower Columbia River, are from a hatchery. And approximately 100% of all salmon harvested in the tributaries below Bonneville Dam and Willamette Falls are hatchery fish. Now, harvest management evaluation pertains to the listing factor, other natural or man-made factors affecting the continuing existence of the ESU, and our criteria that we assess, and we heard about it earlier, is percent hatchery fish on spawning grounds. The department has made changes from shifting portions of some releases to populations where higher stray rates are allowed, such as moving coho and chinook releases from Clackamas and Youngs Bay, or Clackamas and the Bonneville to Youngs Bay and Big Creek, I'm sorry, and ending programs with high stray rates, and even increased opportunity where PHOS targets were below goals, such as the Sandy Spring Chinook population, to allow for increased harvest opportunity. Nearly all populations across the ESU have attained PHOS goals, and for those that have not, adaptive management has led to a decreased toward goals in almost all populations. Now we're going to move on to our chum recovery strategy that Chris mentioned earlier. So the chum recovery strategy was Oregon's effort to learn about the status of Columbia River chum in Oregon and to set the framework for developing a conservation hatchery. Investigations proved functional extirpation on the Oregon side of the river, as well as identification of suitable habitat for reintroduction sites. A conservation hatchery was established at Big Creek Hatchery using Grays River chum. Adjustments were made in 2017 with earlier fry releases, and in 2020 to currently, sufficient numbers of adult returns to Big Creek Hatchery have allowed for various outplanting strategies in the Clatskanie and Big Creek population areas. Spawning ground surveys are detecting adult chum in Youngs Bay, Big Creek, and the Clatskanie Basin. The department updated the chum recovery strategy to primarily assess outplanting strategies and begin the thinking process of expanding the program beyond the coastal stratum. Another big part of our efforts was conducting a climate and ocean change assessment. And the freshwater habitat, summer, stream temperatures, and year-round flow were modeled through the 2080s. Stream temperatures are projected to increase 8 to 31% without counteracting management, and summer and fall flows will further reduce and impact available fish habitat. While the highest rate of change will occur in snow-dominated areas, the most impacted areas will be on streams currently experiencing elevated water temperatures near major population centers. Currently, strategic action plans are in development in the Scappoose and Clackamas with a prioritization lens for mitigating the impacts of a changing climate in select locations. Actions for increasing habitat capacity, connectivity, and riparian shade in specific locations are needed to most effectively mitigate the effects of this changing climate. In conclusion, our review found that over 80% of the 308 actions in the plan are in progress, ongoing, or have been completed. Implementation achievements in the Clackamas and Sandy basins are particularly noteworthy, and we have observed corresponding progress towards delisting goals across all species in those basins. Broad sense recovery goals have also been achieved for Sandy steelhead and Clackamas coho. Partner capacity has been critical to achieving these outcomes. To achieve recovery and delisting, we need to make similar progress in other basins within the ESU and address the challenges of a changing climate. To plan for these future changes, the department has identified 9 priority actions that have not been completed and 24 new actions across all threat categories and research monitoring and evaluation needs. Achieving recovery of lower Columbia River salmon and steelhead will require long-term sustained actions. Moving forward, we need to celebrate our major accomplishments made in the Sandy and Clackamas populations, while having contributors to continue to implement many ongoing actions as well as new adaptive management actions to improve viability across the entire ESU. Freshwater habitat improvements are crucial for achieving recovery and mitigating climate risks, and a renewed effort is needed to increase the capacity of local watershed implementers to increase the pace and scale of restoration action, including the estuary. In the Hood Basin, this is occurring with support from an OED Focused Investment Partnership grant. The department has learned over the last 12 years that some fall Chinook populations are functionally extirpated, and so the department is initiating a conservation hatchery program for Clatskanie fall Chinook. The chum conservation hatchery program is also focused in the Clatskanie Basin as a priority reintroduction area, and focusing monitoring in this area will help evaluate both programs. Finally, the ESU and its populations cross state boundaries. Coordination with the state of Washington as well as NOAA will continue to be important as we adaptively manage the program moving forward. With that, we will open up to questions.
And it should not surprise you that we have some questions. I'll get to those in just a second. I just wanted to mention that in case anybody missed it, this is informational and we aren't taking testimony, but we do have a bunch of questions we'd like to ask. So I'm not sure who was first, but I think it was Commissioner Labhart, and then I'll just start right here and go down the list.
Okay, thank you, Chair Wall. So I'm reading from page 2. The purpose of this informational agenda item is to present the results of the 12-year assessment to the commission and solicit commission and public feedback on the assessment before it is finalized by the department. So Tom, this is draft still. Is that correct?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart, yes, this is close to a final draft. We would like to hear your feedback on what you've heard and read. It is also currently open for public comment through the end of this month. And once we get and implement any comments we receive, then we'll make it final and post it on the website.
That answers my first question. How's the public involved? So
Yep.
that answers my first question. So the plan calls for annual implementation reports and comprehensive view of the 12-year plan approved by the commission. So it was approved by the commission in 2010. So that means, and actually at 22 is when we probably should have had the briefing. It's probably its workload and those kind of things. We're getting to it in 2025. Is that correct?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart, that's absolutely correct.
Okay.
As you can see, it was a big effort to put this together, so it did take some time after we got the data in 2022. Staff were also detailed to other high priority
Okay. So I have to
agency efforts.
I'm sorry. I have to publicly admit, I try to read everything, as you guys know. This thing's 136 pages long. I did not read everything. So there's a lot in here. It's almost a ream of paper just in this agenda item. So I admit that I didn't read everything. So I'll say that right up front. A couple comments right off the bat. The implementation team is a diverse group of representative government agencies, watershed councils, and non-governmental agencies and interested parties. I would highly recommend, there's a lot of work in this. I would highly recommend that you have a page that lists those people that worked on this plan, because this is a lot of work and they deserve some kind of credit or attention for the people that did that. So I would recommend that you put at least a page in here. Here's who the implementation team was, so that we can recognize their work, because the implementation team's kind of out there right now. So that's the first thing I would say. Then on page 9, I think it is. Go there. So I think you answered this a little bit. So this plan was approved by Oregon in 2010. Did Washington, I should know the answer to this, but I don't. Did Washington approve a similar 12-year assessment?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Labhart, Washington definitely developed a plan. I don't know if they had a separate, Oregon has a separate plan, plus Oregon's plan is incorporated into the federal recovery plan directly. The federal recovery plan has Oregon and Washington information. I'm not exactly sure if Washington separately have their plan approved.
Okay. So
but there's a federal recovery plan that covers
that includes both
states.
Okay. Might look a little different than our plan,
Yes.
but it's approved by the feds. Okay. So I would highly also recommend, and you guys have done a really good job. I'm a stickler for acronyms because there's a lot of people out in the public that when we start using acronyms, I go, huh, what's that? So on page 11, I've got one particular one. I even asked Bob. You refer to you say significant resources monitoring the VSP matrix harvest impacts and measurable criteria. I have no idea what VSP is. So can you explain that one?
Viable salmonid population parameters.
Okay. So I would highly recommend, I couldn't find in this 136 pages, just put a page of acronyms. And so that if somebody's reading this from the public that doesn't really, is not into this stuff like you guys are, that they can understand what some of this stuff. I think that was it, other than saying, wow, and I think we also need to recognize, and you said this several times, this is a 25-year plan, not a 12-year plan, right? I mean, it's 12-year assessment, but it's got another 12 years. And there's still a lot of things in here that need to be funded and a lot of work that needs to be done for the Lower Columbia River. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Commissioner Morrison.
Thank you, and really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. And I just want to take the opportunity to commend everyone in the department and the many partners who've been involved in implementing the plan. But it is pretty remarkable that 80+% of the overall 317 recommended actions are in some stage of implementation. So again, hats off to everybody who's been involved in that. I wanted to ask maybe some follow-up questions around the point that is raised several times in the report, and you've raised it in your presentation here too, about capacity for partner organizations and how much of an impact that's had and success in various basins. And you've highlighted a couple, and in the the additional action sections here, you've highlighted some capacity actions that need to happen. I guess two questions on that. One is, do you have a sense of kind of what has stymied that level of partner engagement in some of the basins that have watersheds that haven't had it? And two, what types of incentives are available that might help to, I guess, catalyze that kind of partner engagement and capacity building at the local level?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Morrison. For the record, this is Jim Brick. To answer your question, we've seen, obviously, we highlighted the successes we've seen in the Sandy and Clackamas, and they both have huge restoration programs. We haven't seen that in the coastal stratum. And some of the drawbacks to that is like a non-tax base that's associated with the local SWCDs. Another one is just we got to get past some of the mentality of being kind of the small rural communities that don't really want to listen. They don't want to play in the sand as well as some of the other folks. And so that's been a complicating factor to getting projects done. And we really need to move towards working, improving habitat capacity. And we're just not getting there. In terms of incentives, one of the actions we mentioned of incorporating is try to find another partner that would be willing to step into that basin and take on the role of a focused restoration, or even being a holder of grant to our Western Oregon stream restoration biologists to start implementing more work in those areas. And we're very interested in, we're continuing to have those conversations with the local SWCD, but they have multiple responsibilities to different folks, and they don't get to do 100% focused restoration.
Thank you. If I could ask one other question, well, and I will again start by saying really appreciation for the component of the assessment that looks at climate change and trying to plan ahead for what things are going to look like down the line. And of course, one of the recommendations makes sense is to look at, okay, where should we prioritize work in some watersheds that have look like they're going to be a little more resilient down the line. I guess I'd like to, if you could share a little bit about how you would envision that moving forward, how that prioritization could occur.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Wall, Commissioner Morrison. To answer that question, we have two ongoing efforts right now in both the Clackamas and the Scappoose, and we have a committee that's part of the Clackamas Partnership, and we have hired a consultant, and we have a temperature monitoring effort that has gone on for 3 years. They collected temperature information at over 100 temperature probes for 3 years, and Portland State University has actually taken that information and provided us with an assessment. They looked at a number of factors beyond just temperature change. And so the partnership is coming together and looking on how we would prioritize those based upon that assessment. And so that is in the works. It hasn't been finalized. We've talked about looking at some of the other mechanisms that folks have used to prioritize restoration for changing climate, such as the All-Age Analyzer. I might be getting a little bit in the weeds here. I'm sorry. But that effort's ongoing. And then we're also looking at the Scappoose Basin, and we know that there's already severe temperature limitations. So we've taken the pace of, we need to increase capacity where we know cool water will be, and we need to increase connectivity to those areas. And then areas where we think we don't have temperature problems now, but we are in the future, there's going to be hopefully a robust riparian program around those areas that are contributing to theirs where we think is going to change the most, become temperature limited for salmon into the future.
Thanks. And maybe just to clarify a little bit, I guess you talked about that partnership that's working to do that prioritization. I guess that's what I was trying to pull at, was the opportunity for, public engagement in that prioritization process. And maybe that's through that partnership that you mentioned.
Yes, they are reaching out to the partnership is actually attempting to grow their partnership right now, and community engagement is a very large part, including diverse members of our community. They're reaching out. We have folks representing urban watershed councils also on the partnership. And so they use various minority and small businesses to complete portions of the restoration, and they are absolutely helping inform how we're going to move forward into the future.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to?
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Morrison, I could just add a little bit more, maybe another example of how I think the department fits into this. I think we bring, analytical skills and these kind of assessments that we can share with partners that really, they may not have local capacity to develop these kind of modeling outputs to help think about where these changes are going to be happening. Some of the other partners who are working in the basin, for example, on estuary restoration, do have those kind of analytical skills, and they've been incorporating sea level rise into thinking about how they're going to do estuary restoration and prioritizing. So the department has a couple of different roles that we can play here and how we communicate these and share these with partners, and also then they can often take the step to develop strategic action plans that incorporate this information in a more, participatory way like you're talking about.
Thank you. Commissioner Moldal.
Thanks, Chair Wall. Firstly, thank you for this excellent presentation and the report, draft report's very readable. Really appreciate the work that went into this. First, a comment, as Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde said this morning, the magic that's going on in the Klamath Basin, of course, fish passage, water quality, water quantity, habitat, and seeing the numbers in here for the Clackamas coho salmon, positive trends in the Sandy River steelhead in the Clackamas and Sandy basins is so gratifying. It's more good news, more evidence that habitat matters and the good work that's going on. So thank you for highlighting that. The question I have is, in the report, you mentioned that most of the 307 actions identified in the plan to address threats and limiting factors have been implemented, are in progress, or are ongoing. What's the process by which you revisit those priority actions, soliciting information to the public? When do you tweak them? How do you tweak them? Could you expound on the adjustments to those actions over time?
Sure, Commissioner Model. This is the actual process that we have taken today to modify those actions or add new actions. And so I did reach out to our implementation team prior to this process. So this, as part of a public outreach effort, we brought this draft to the implementation team before we brought it out to the public to help inform and develop new actions that we thought were needed. And we incorporated those actions that we thought would help deliver us to recovery the quickest without actually creating a major change in the plan itself. And so that is the process that we've used, is this 12-year assessment. And then we do check in on an annual basis around the release of the annual report too. But this is the main driver that we've been using to add new actions and take an accounting of past actions.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spellbrink, and then Vice Chair Hatfield-Hyde.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wall. Yeah, appreciate all the work that went into this. I guess one concern, and maybe I missed it. We talked a lot about reducing, or it talks about reducing PFAS. Of course, that's kind of easy to do. We just got hatchery production, and I guess I would like to see, and maybe I missed it here, but I think a welcome addition would be, kind of what you showed there with 75% of the harvest in the Columbia is from hatchery fish now. And maybe if I missed it, let me know, but I would like to see where it would be maybe a simple statement that the hatchery system in the lower Columbia River is necessary to mitigate for the loss of naturally produced salmonoids because of the critical fisheries that hatchery fish support and the resulting economic benefits, just some kind of statement like that, the importance of hatcheries. I was glad Jim Muck testified earlier. We had talked on the phone and we talked about some of the successes that we've had in the lower Columbia with hatchery fish, where there's now, naturally spawning populations that were not there. They're all offspring from hatchery introductions that have been since ended. And you have those, you've seen some fantastic results that came from hatchery parents. Anyway, if it'd be possible, I'd love to see something in there that emphasizes the importance of hatcheries on the Columbia River.
Chair Wall, Commissioner Spellberg, thank you for that comment. You're absolutely right. Hatcheries are very important. Hatcheries are complex things. They need to be managed appropriately. They're a tool for conservation and reintroduction. Where there is natural production happening, we also want to make sure that there aren't any negative impacts. But your statement is absolutely valid, and we appreciate you pointing that out.
Thank you. I just want to thank Tom, Chris, Jim for giving me a panic attack at Christmas when this came in the mail, this package. This is a lot. The way I got through it was I forced my 15-year-old to read to me out loud while driving in the car. And then I finally finished reading it last night between 1 and 3 in the morning. So having said that, it's so much information in here. And so I guess a couple of the things that I am, that concern me are that that 80-year modeling of the climate issues and temperature going forward. That seemed very frightening to me, and it was already brought up. And then the other thing that I think, and it was already brought up this morning, but some of these communities that need a little extra help, I feel like I can so relate to those communities, like with the work we're doing in the Sprague. And I think we're beginning to find that some of our more rural populations need to be approached in different ways. And some of the issues that are facing them, may not be, some of these issues may not be at the top of their mind of what they're thinking about or what they're worrying about in their concerns. So the more we can move forward in being creative at looking at what's going on with communities so that we can do good restoration, I think is important. And, there are places that are trying to unlock that. And I would just say that I think that is a concern. I worry about things like, bass and, geez, you guys deal with cormorants and then the cormorants go somewhere else. I mean, it just goes on and on, right? There's so much in this. But what I want to hear from you is just like one line from each of you of like, what in this region keeps you up at night? Like if you were to take out of this huge plan with obviously so many partners and so much work that people are trying to do here, like what is your biggest concern? And Jim, I'd like to know from you because this is your baby.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde. There are so many potential options, but you did mention one. And so I don't want to dive in the weeds on this unless there's questions, but we have some, we have concerns and obviously hard targets to reach in the Columbia Gorge and those populations. And so we did make a comment in our plan at time about what are the true status of the populations. We thought maybe there was some dependency on some of those populations. And so that is tied to a lot of to the abundance that we actually need to achieve. And so we have asked NOAA in the plan to maybe reevaluate that. And so I think that would, depending on what the results of those, they could be easier to deal with or less hard or more hard to deal with. But that has a lot of implications towards difficulties that we would have to achieve to get recovery in those areas.
Yeah, Chair Wall, Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde. I think that the concerns about climate and a changing environment in this area are, would be on the top of my mind. And I think that it's just a call to action that we really need to think differently about we may have set, restoration goals in the plan, but those need to be really increased and we need to think about it differently. I think that the work that's been done in the Clackamas and the Sandy to improve passage is really, critical to when we're thinking about those areas that are the core areas of cold water. The fish need great access to those places, and that's what's going to keep these populations, viable into the future. And so just keeping our laser focus on how we can make that happen is really where we need to be if we want to have these populations on the landscape in the future.
Chair Wall, Commissioner Hatfield-Hyde, a couple of thoughts. One, I'm glad you weren't, I'm not glad that you weren't, but the original plan, this is about a third the size of that.
There you go. I was thinking about that just because we did the Rogue South Coast, you know, that was
Yeah.
kind of like, wow, this is so, but I can't even imagine.
This is probably
And
the
then
longest plan.
there's such relief, I think, that we aren't assessing the entire Columbia River in Oregon under this. I was like, oh my Lord.
In terms of the 80 years, it's daunting. Climate change, environmental change is something I think we all worry about. The good thing is that habitat actions can mitigate or even make conditions better than they will be worsened by climate change. So if we get the work that's being done in the Clackamas and Sandy done in other locations, I think that's a possibility to offset those impacts. What it takes to do that in other locations is going to be difficult and different than in the Clackamas and Sandy. The Clackamas and Sandy have significant amount of public lands, which Jim was alluding to. And so getting that synergy and the partnerships, it's going to take a little bit of a different effort. And I really appreciate what you said about unlocking these in local communities. That is something that we think about. We're actually currently talking with OSU, Dr. Megan Jones, and one of her graduate students about studies to look at this type of thing. How do you foster conservation actions and partnerships? So something we're thinking about. I don't think we have the answer yet, but that's something where we want to explore and try to improve on.
Thank you. Do you have a quick follow-up question?
Yeah, a quick follow-up. So the Clackamas and Sandy are being recognized, you know, as doing great work. And Jim, you mentioned there still needs to be a lot of work done on the coast. So if I recall correctly, the Focused Investment Partnership with OWEB is funding major projects on the Clackamas and Sandy with a 5-year, $12 million grant that goes into that. So they are currently identifying projects for the next round of FIP and the Focused Investment Program. And one of the key is aquatic habitat for native fish species. So if you're working with those watershed councils on the coast where you're saying we need more work done in this area on the coast, it's a big application and it's a lot of work, but there's a potential for some significant funding that could go into the coast. I mean, there's projects that are funded there now, but potential for some significant investments by OWEB, and they're currently working on identifying projects right now for the next round. So,
Commissioner Lockhart, you're absolutely right. There is a strong effort going on with the Clackamas Focused Investment Partnership, and they are currently redoing their strategic action plan with a focus on mitigating climate, and they will be going for a second OWEB FIP. That is an opportunity to present with the folks in the coastal strata. Unfortunately for the Clatskanie Basin, where we have two major restoration efforts, the Watershed Council that is existing there has kind of winked in and out over time as they've lost their funding from OWEB for not meeting OWEB objectives for getting work on the ground and meeting with local practitioners. But we continue to try to work with those folks as best we can and try to bring them up to a speed. Right now, I'm working with them to try to get a couple projects on the ground to kind of improve those relationships, but those are ultimately a target. That is one basin that I think should have that over many of the other, or not over many of the others, but the ones that is lacking right now, because we've got a lot of work going on there and we have a ton of opportunity. There's very little infrastructure compared to some of the other basins in there. And so we really want to focus on that and attempt to get some good restoration work done there. And that is our goal right now.
We have a question or two probably maybe from Commissioner DeFries. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Gosh, yeah, big document. I like Commissioner Labhart. I skimmed through it all. I didn't read verbatim all of it, but impressive work all the way through. I was just curious, kind of maybe to piggyback off of Vice Chair Hatfield Hyde's question, if you could maybe pie chart it for me just really quick, the top 1 to 5-ish like issues for expanding, improving these fisheries. Like, I'm assuming one is money. Like, if you had all the money in the world, a lot of these problems could be helped. But then how big are the issues, like these social issues where we're not able to find willing partners in these rural communities? I mean, how big of the pie chunk is that? And then, like, what about the efficacy of some of these habitat restoration projects? Or like, if you do a project, is it 100% like this is going to improve this stream bed in the way that we were assuming? Or is there, we see this in rangeland a lot, where we will go and do a restoration project and it may not have taken or worked as much as we would have liked. I think stream restoration is more successful than what we see out here, but I'm just curious if, like, is it 90% funds? Is it 50% funds, 40% human dimension? Like, what's the breakout there of kind of the biggest barriers of actually making big change?
Chair Wall, Commissioner Hall DeFreeze. I don't know where I should look.
Look forward.
this way, assuming
The
she can
camera's
see me.
forward.
She's paying attention. You can look.
Okay. Excellent questions. I think there's definitely a synergy between the funding and the human dimensions. As Jim mentioned, some of these watershed councils that aren't able to establish the local partnerships and get that synergy going become ineffective and therefore lose funding. I think we need to explore ways to make sure that, or how do we improve their effectiveness? So I think that's a big question. There's probably a lot of different factors that go into it. We don't have OWEB here, but it'd be interesting to hear their thoughts on watershed council effectiveness and what that takes. I think there's a lot of things involved in that.
Thank you. I have some questions, but I want to start with a couple points. One is, like you've heard from other commissioners, I appreciate that you actually got to the part about assessing the climate change and what the impacts are, and that we have these two basins to look at. I think, and it seems like we've even honed it down a bit on cold water areas and riparian areas. Is there anything else you can say about moving forward? This is a huge one. So, and kudos to you for digging into it. In terms of going, is there anything else you can say about going into some of these other basins? Because it's clearly, we've made some headway where we dug into it. Anything else you can add on that?
Thank you, Commissioner Wall. We have to date focused mostly on those two basins because they're closest to the major population centers, and we see that some sections of those areas are going to be most impacted. We would have to take some of the current efforts and expand those to other areas, and that is in the plan. But we wanted to get through the couple of efforts that were going on right now, which are not completed yet, before we start thinking about some of these other basins, because they're going to have less change. But I would think that we would carry some of the same methods and plans into these other watersheds. It's just more of a matter of what type of actions would be most appropriate and what locations would be most appropriate to do those sorts of climate change pieces, mitigation efforts. And it could be looking at how the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service uses the RAD. Where do we resist? Where do we accept? And where do we direct? And so those are all different pathways we could take. But we just haven't got there with some of those other ones. And we would do that, or I would plan on directing some of those and working with those folks to do that after we kind of get a couple of these key ones done first.
Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Chair Wall, that's a great question. And I think one place that we can look for to look for the future is in the Hood River, where we do need significant uplift across populations. And the partnership there was recently received funding for a FIP that's going to be going on over the next 5 to 6 years. And that FIP is focused on the things that are going to move the dial for climate change. They're going to be doing water conservation and protecting that water in stream through water conservation efforts and, working with the agricultural community there. And then there's also some fish passage work in there that also is going to be really important across all of these species. So I think that Hood FIP, if we can keep, that's a really good model. And, that group is done a really good job with their application and is obviously high functioning. So it gives me hope that we're going to continue to be able to make some progress in the Hood in the same way we've been able to make in these other basins. And I think that's going to be really critical if you're looking at the overall plans of the goal, because the Hood is really critical in that gorge stratum to meet the plan goals.
That was the second part of this question for me, is it sounded like the Hood is listed as primary. Is that the area is prime? I mean, it was really useful, actually, the way you put this together, in terms of getting this information both by population and by the area assessment. But could you talk a little more about the Hood? Because it's great news that OWEB will come through again for us and help us work on this. Is it primary as a basin as well as some of the populations? Could you just say a bit about that?
Yeah, Chair Wall, thanks for the question. So the plan has goals that are by these strata. So there's 3 different strata in the plan. Populations are grouped into coastal, cascade, and gorge strata. And so to achieve the recovery goals kind of under this delisting scenario, each of those strata needs to have populations that are low or very low extinction risk. And so in the gorge stratum, we have some natural limitations on some of those populations on how much habitat is really available. But the Hood is one place on the Oregon side of the river where we have a larger basin that could potentially support, larger self-sustaining populations across several species, across, Chinook and multiple Chinook run types, steelhead, summer and winter steelhead, and coho salmon. And so the Hood is really important in the delisting scenario for that reason, just because of the natural limitations of some of the other basins. Now, there is also the populations in Washington, and they are also an important part of that gorge picture. But in Oregon, the Hood is really a critical linchpin for achieving the delisting scenario goals.
Thank you. That helps on that one. I have a few more questions, and then I see you have one too. We've heard for a long time that the smolt to adult ratio coming back to the Columbia needs to be 4%. I think it's the number I have in my head, 4% to be self-replacing. And ESA is different. It's a different level. And this plan is to meet ESA goals. But that's a lower level. Is that right? One is 4%, one is more along the 2% number, or is that a question I should just withdraw?
No.
I can see by the look on your face, and I'm happy to withdraw it and talk to you later about it.
Chair Wall, I'm personally not familiar with the 4% you're referring to.
Okay.
That may be in Columbia River Fisheries Management or something. But this, looking at the recovery goals, there are a number of different criteria. The 4% is not one of them. It goes back to those VSP parameters, which are abundance, productivity, spatial structure, and diversity. The productivity and abundance are kind of mixed into one. And so we look at what the numbers coming back, some of the figures that Chris talked about in his part of the presentation. I would guess if we're meeting the abundance goals of the plan, we're going to be meeting replacement or better. So if 4% is what's required for replacement, then I would guess the getting to recovery would happen.
Thank you. And sorry for asking a question that brings 2 things or 3 or 6 into this. What I'm trying to get at actually is a general idea, because you've hit the halfway mark. You've done a boatload of work. Now we have another, half of this time. Are we on a path to meeting these recovery goals in the 25 years?
Chair Wall, that's an excellent question. I think we're on a better path for some of the species than others. I think we're making progress with coho and steelhead. I'm not sure we'll quite hit it in 25 years. That's actually a short time frame for given species life cycle, as well as the extent of the habitat needs, which take time to come to fruition. So, but I think we're moving down that path for those species. We see some good improvements on the chum reintroduction. We have a self-sustaining conservation hatchery program, which is a big achievement, and we're able to use that to start reintroducing in other locations. But still, that's kind of starting from the ground floor. I don't think we'll get to recovery for chum in the 25 years. Fall Chinook are the ones that are going to take a little bit longer. We're just starting a reintroduction program, like was Jim mentioned at the end, in the Clatskanie. Because our monitoring that was implemented as a result of this plan really indicated that Chinook weren't doing as well in that coastal stratum, especially as we thought they might be. So Chinook, I don't think we'll get there in 25 years.
And a detail on that piece, just to, so I have a whole picture, the Clatskanie one, the conservation hatchery, we've already initiated it or we're going to?
Chair Wall, that was put in place when the new Mitchell-Act BIOP came out at the end of 2024, and we are starting that now, and those fish will be stocked next year. So we've taken brood and are rearing them. They just haven't been put out yet. They haven't been stocked into the Clatskanie yet.
Thank you, that helps. Just on this theme of trying to get a really good idea of where you think we are, there's a remarkable chart in here about all of the adaptive management actions and where from here. Are we, that list of adaptive management projects, is that sort of, we've looked at this at the halfway mark, this is what we need to do, and now we need to go find money for it? Is that, you know, how does that kind of progress toward the 25 years?
Chair Wall, I'll let Jim and Chris add to this if I don't exactly get it right, but that list is kind of what we're telling ourselves are the things we need to focus on. So
Okay.
Jim will be looking at doing those things as our lead implementation coordinator for this entire plan and working with others to make sure they happen. Some of them will definitely require funding, outside funding with partners, but it's just kind of prioritizing what we're going to be looking at.
Thank you. It actually just helps, including when we get to what Ken Loffing was talking about, that we're about to start looking at more budgets. And is this in there? Is this, you know, you don't need to answer that question right now, but that would be one of the things that we would be looking at is if we need this adaptive management list in order to get to the 25-year goals, is it funded? So it just helps us to, I think, to look at that. So I'm going to stop there for a minute because I've asked more questions than other people got a chance to, but I might have one more at the end. Go ahead.
Okay, I just had a thought. Down in Klamath, with some of the communities, the Willamette Partnership is sort of stepping in to help organize. And at first, I even know that when I first heard like the Willamette Partnership was stepping in to help with some things in Klamath, I was like, yeah, Willamette this is wrong side of the state. What are these people doing down in our part of the country or whatever? But the reality is, I think some of those groups have so much more capacity to deal with these complex grants and things. That's kind of what they do. So if you start looking at getting an OWEB FIP or an RCPP or even big U.S. Fish and Wildlife grants, the administrative burden to try to pull those grants off and do it well in these small communities is hard. And it doesn't mean that people, and nobody wants to be like the Watershed Council that's, you know, not doing well. I think there's just another more to the story. So, and even in the Hood River, you have people like Farmers Conservation Alliance, right? That's what it's called.
Yeah.
Farmers Conservation Alliance. And, you know, they cluster and bring capacity just because they're so solid, you know? So if you don't have that in these places, and I know that's not an ODF and W issue really, but it's just worth thinking again. with our partners like OWEB. Small community plan. Okay.
Did you have a comment you want to make on that one? Or?
I agree with the statement.
Yeah, go ahead, and then I have one more.
Commissioners, I just want to say that it's really, I'm just going to speak on behalf of staff. It's really gratifying for you to be so engaged in this conversation. Because it is a lot of work. And so when y'all talk about landscape scale and being strategic and prioritizing and thinking and anticipating about the impacts of climate, that's what this assessment is doing, is really exactly what you have in mind. And for me, I'm originally an East Coast person, so I often think about things in the scale of like East Coast size. But if you look at the geographic scope of this report, we're talking like 26 populations in it's like you could fit 3 East Coast states in that, right? Depending on how you chose them. I mean, this is a huge lift. And you think about 120 pages, which just for the audience, they can see like, what does 120 pages look like? You could probably, if every page in this assessment represented an hour of work, you could probably multiply that by 1,000. When you think about the projects that are in progress or completed, how like thousands of hours of voluntary conservation, research, monitoring, assessment, public meetings. I mean, you go on and on and on. I mean, it's just a really tremendous amount of effort. And I'm not just saying for the agency. I mean, like Oregon is really impressive. That's all. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. And I know that there's cause for concern in this assessment and there's bright spots. There's no guarantee for success, even with another 12 years. But I mean, it's these kinds of conversations and the engagement you bring to them that really kind of makes me feel optimistic and just tremendous gratitude for the work that y'all do.
Thank you. That's a good perspective to get right now. Thank you. I want to ask just one more question on when we look at the total list of either the adaptive management actions or what's left, just some sense of how likely we are to be able to get those moving and keep them moving, if you have any ability to answer that. I'm looking for a general sense of what's it going to take to keep going on these?
Chair Wall, I think we've been talking about some of the challenges of moving things forward, but like Director Colbert just mentioned, there's a will, and Oregon seems to usually find a way. So we'll see what happens. I'll pass it over to Jim and Chris to see if you want to add to that.
I'll briefly add to that. Those actions that are listed in the adaptive management table, they range from somewhat simple to incredibly complex. And so you're going to get a mixed bag, I think, in the ability to pull off some of those actions. And so I don't have a good breakdown of whether 50% of them will be easy or not, but I would say that over half of them will be easy to implement. And then as we get towards the more difficult ones, we'll have to wait and see if there's the will to do some of those efforts. Because we are talking about looking at potentially some priorities statewide. And so if you take from here, you have to go from there. And so those are decisions that are beyond my ability to make.
Thank you. Anything else, Chris? Or sure. Then I think maybe we could, it looks like we have 2 more questions, but I was thinking that we could begin to wrap this up and talk about, very briefly return to something that Commissioner Labhart asked about, which is sort of next steps and any more engagement from us. So if you can talk a little bit about next steps, Tom.
So Chair Wall, next steps are we're going to take the comments we've received from you, incorporate them into the assessment. We'll take the comments we receive from the public, incorporate those that are warranted to be included, and then finalize the draft posted on the website, which should happen, I would guess, by the end of January. Then Jim is going to take what this assessment has yielded and continue the implementation work with all of the partners and all the people inside the agency and outside the agency that are involved in this effort. We are not planning, I don't think this assessment requires commission approval.
Go ahead.
So we're going to get to see the public comments that go back into this?
We were going to just finalize the plan and post it to the website. We can distribute it back to you. We hadn't planned on coming back and doing another presentation to the commission.
You know, presumably when we come back with a new plan in another 12 years, that will have to have commission
Okay.
approval.
So we'll get a copy of it though, so we can see what you
Yes.
incorporated into this then.
Yep.
Okay, I understand.
Commissioner Spellbrink?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wall. Just a quick, I hate to even open this can of worms, but is there any light at the end of the tunnel as far as dealing with in-river predation? You know, bird avian going out, seals and sea lions. I guess seals are, now we're finding out they're working on them going out too. And boy, it just seems like lots of times we just keep swimming uphill if we, you know, more successful we are on one end, we feed them to somebody else on the other end.
Chair Wall, Commissioner Spellbrink, yep, predators are a difficult one. I think we have solutions to predators at kind of the points where they're having the most impact, you know, at Willamette Falls and Bonneville Dam, and have been working to reduce that impact. I think we've been successful in that area. In terms of in-river, I think there's more discussion on that and how they handle it. I think you're also probably referring to avian predators and
We, you know, by moving them out of the lower river, we moved them into the
move
upper
them
river.
onto the bridge, and it becomes difficult. Even though there's fewer, there may be more of an impact based on where they are spatially. Again, those are some of those big, larger than ODFW efforts. The Corps of Engineers leads that effort. And we're definitely involved in those discussions and, you know, as a community are trying to look for solutions there. I can't tell you now what those might be.
Then I think we'll close there with enormous thanks for what you all have done for the last 12 years. It's remarkable. If when you send it back to us, if you could include like the implementation team's comments, just because it would be useful to be able to see those, I think that would be useful. Other than that, I think we're at a time in the day where we should stop for lunch and come back in an hour. And we have one more major informational item and then some what look like relatively quick items on the agenda. So see you in an hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.